They were headed for the inn, but Boyd couldn't get the idea of becoming a swordsman out of his head. He wanted that feeling again, the feeling that he had power. That he had some control of his destiny. He needed a tool to help him not get his ass kicked every time a childlike demon aggressively tried to kill him. At present, Flean and Boyd stood at the edge of a street corner overlooking an old and decrepit building. In front of the building stood a large, hooded figure wielding an impressively pointy sword, and surrounded by a mixture of undead creatures of varying sizes and shapes in addition to a cadre of gargoyles. They remained largely motionless minus a few steps to and fro. Boyd attempted to scan the big thing, but nothing appeared. He was cut off from scanning this creature. Wait, what's his name? I can't scan him, Boyd said. Who? Flean answered. That guy. Boyd pointed. The glowing skull thing in robes with the big-ass sword. He is the Lycian Exarch, Demon Dread the Exiled One. He is wretchedness incarnate. His very presence offends me. His acts are so heinous, he has been exiled even from the other liches. He is a disgusting maggot. Flean spat on the ground. But also we should avoid him. I am loath to admit this, but while I am extremely noble and holy and powerful, I am no match for a Lycian Exarch of his rank. Because Sir Boyd wasn't always cognizant of his surroundings, Flean added, nor are you. No one man could defeat that creature. Why is he on level 1 of the maze then? Shouldn't he be the boss or something? He is a quest giver, but his quest has obviously been solved already, or a large exclamation point would be above his head. Many quest givers are much higher rank than the rest of the level. Then why doesn't he go do the quest himself? Flean paused, he's probably busy or something. He's got like 10 gargoyle things by him too. Why doesn't he just ask them to do it? Those are stone souls. They are bound to him. They are filled with his necromantic hatred, and this is what animates them. So they have to stand by him? Sort of. They are probably busy too. Doing what? I am not evil sworn, I do not keep track of their activities or proclivities. The lich was holding a sword full of wicked edges. The metal undulated like something was trying to get out of the sword itself. The hilt was made of golden scales. The scabbard was made of bone. It radiated death. The soft pulses of magic it let off were punctuated by the screams of the souls it had rendered. Boyd whistled, what's that sword he's got? Let's just get that one. An ancient and terrible thing, a cursed sword of the most unholy. What's it called though? Boyd asked. It is Souldrinker, Harbinger of Doom. Yeah, that tracks. Hey, I think I just want that one. Let's go get it. I wasn't done, Souldrinker, Harbinger of Doom, Drinker of Souls, the Blood Slave. Yeah, I get it, it's awesome. Let's go take it. Flean was aghast, I wasn't done, but the idea of you wielding that sword literally sickens me. It is fueled by the blood and souls of those it has slain. Its powers are pure necromancy, and… Sir Boyd, come to your senses. I cannot allow you to consider this malignancy. Moreover, you're a monk. You aren't even proficient with greatswords, much less a cursed entity. It would consume your entire being to even touch it. No one in our foray is more capable of handling a Lycian Exarch than myself. I am Ior's humble servant and the High Paladin of the Filari. Salia could never handle an unholy brigade such as this. She would succumb to the aura of fear and dread without divine intervention. Only I, Flean, High Paladin of the Filari, am capable of withstanding the mental onslaught of a Lycian Exarch. Okay, go get Gmol then. He's a cleric or priest or something, right? He does holy stuff. He'll be fine. Gmol is that isn't the point. I am most capable. I have devoted my life to defeating evil. Were it possible for any of us to defeat this foul creature, it would be me. Flean extended his neck to its maximum height. You dare to question the High Paladin of the Filari? By my oath, I will end this evil right now. Fleein unsheathed his blade and began to stomp towards the threat. Boyd raced ahead and placed his hand across Fleein's chest. No, seriously, that dude is gonna kick your ass, man. His sword's a lot better than yours. Just look at it. I got a better idea. Y'all got stealing here? Fleein looked at Boyd quizzically. First off, the Blade of Light and Majesty is an artifact of unparalleled power wielded exclusively by the High Paladin of the Falari and only when on his most noble quest. It is certainly a better sword than Souldrinker, which is a silly thing with a stupid name. Second, do we have stealing? Do you mean you plan to steal the prized sword of a Lycian exarch from his hands? You are neither a rogue, nor a thief, nor a pickpocket, nor a shifter, nor any other class with the ability to steal. You would not get within 50 feet of the exarch before your skin was flayed from your body. Nah, I'll nick it when he sleeps. He's a lich. He doesn't sleep. He only rests in his coffin. Moreover, when he rests in his domain, he's immensely more powerful. Godlike in power. Forget this foolhardy task. Boyd thought for a minute. You know a lot about this guy too then, huh? Of course. I am High Paladin. I know of all the most evil creatures in Zenith. Lycian exarchs are amongst the most evil and vile. Does he move? They're foul and odious. Does he move around or not? Putrefying the very air you breathe. It moves to and from its lair. Boyd thought for a minute. Where's his lair? In that house behind him. That's it? It walks to and from that house? Correct. Boyd looked up and formed a plan. It was a stupid plan. This was confirmed as the bottom of his vision lit up with Agent of Chaos activated. I need that scroll of flight you told me about on the way here. Fleein immediately handed Boyd a scroll of flight. Fleein felt it was imperative to share equally with the rest of the foray. Of course, and for what may I ask? I need a hacksaw too. The hacksaw? This would be more appropriate for you than Souldrinker, I agree, but as a monk you should be honing your chi and your body. Besides, this item is not available at this point in our foray. We will have to make it several levels lower to sever the hacksaw from Killbutcher's arm. I am surprised you know of this item, Sir Boyd. Have you been studying? No, forget about it. I was talking about a tool. You got anything that cuts rocks? Like I need something that can cut through rocks. What sort of rock? It matters not. The Stonemasons Guild is hireable, or any freelance geomancer can easily cut any rock you need. Why would we have a tool to perform menial tasks yourself? This line of questioning makes no sense. So there is a spell that cuts rocks? Does that mean there are scrolls? There are scrolls, right? I can do a scroll now. Fleein lowered his neck. I am becoming uncomfortable answering these questions and I bid you adieu. Fleein walked away. Fleein, you got that map? Where is the Stonemasons Guild? Fleein didn't answer. Boyd stormed into their room at the inn. Hey team, no time to chat. Just stopping by for a minute. Hey, where's the supply packs? Just need to borrow a few gold to get a bite to eat. The other members of the foray looked up to see an extremely dirty Boyd Bridges march into the room, rifle through the bags and leave holding a number of items with his pockets clinking with gold. Boyd noticed their mana total had risen to 39 from 22. Found it. See ya. Thanks y'all. Everyone's doing a great job. Rest up, big day tomorrow, you're a good boy Jellybean. I'll be back soon, buddy. He gently patted Jellybean Jenkins' head as he walked by. Jellybean growled fiercely in response. No one had said a word. Fleein awoke to a scraping noise. Assuming this was most likely the prying fingers of zombies attempting to invade their base, he grabbed his sword and leapt from his cot ready to strike down the horde of filth. Fortunately for any zombie hordes, they had not attempted to invade Fleein's base, and instead, the noise arose from Boyd, who was currently shaving his beard with a large and dangerous-looking sword. What are you holding? Oh goddess, you absolute idiot, what have you done? By the light of Ior, you've doomed us all. Oh, this? It's my new sword. I'm practicing with it. It's hard to use. You are holding Souldrinker, harbinger of doom, drinker of souls, the blood slave, that which was possessed by. Boyd interrupted, no, it isn't. It most certainly is, I immediately recognize it. We just spoke of it yesterday. Boyd continued shaving, nah, man, this Boyd looked around the room. This is a different one. I can see the insignia bearing the name Souldrinker, harbinger of doom, drinker of souls, the blood slave, that which was possessed by he who is doomed, unholy beacon of. Boyd held up his hand, motioning Fleon to stop talking. Where do you see it? Fleon pointed at the area where the blade met the hilt. It's right there. Oh dear goddess, you've scratched it out. You craven fool. How did you even etch the blade? You know this blade is made of the souls of its victims, right? You have scratched souls from existence. Do you really think that makes a difference? Do you think the blade is less evil now? Goddess, I beseech you, I had nothing to do with this. Fleon fell to the floor and began praying. Fleon collapsed against the floor. A sword soul binds himself to a weapon. A sword soul can only use a single weapon for his entire life. You impudent, reckless, scoundrel of a man. You have bound yourself to that muck you are holding. You have permanently ingrained that offal into your being. How could you do this? You are corrupted by the Souldrinker. I am on a foray with a corrupted one. My deepest nightmares are true. You have tainted our entire mission. Goddess, I beseech thee again. Fleon went back to praying. Boyd flung more shaving cream out the window, then washed his face and sat down in the chair beside him. There was a disgruntled noise from outside that Fleon understood to mean someone had been struck by the expelled cream. He would pray for their well-being tonight. Boyd seemed unaware. Nah, man. I'm good. This isn't Souldrinker, it's a different one. I just found it. Fleon buried his face in his hands. You will show me where and how you acquired this. You will tell me where and how you acquired the money to multiclass. You will give me every detail of your last 6 hours, and if somehow you can explain to me why I shouldn't throw that monstrosity into the deepest ravine I can find and then permanently remove you from our foray, then we can discuss the implications of what you have done. Boyd hoisted himself up using Souldrinker as a lever. The blade scratched the wooden floor and let out a tiny scream of writhing pain. You betcha, bud. Fleon and Boyd stood in front of the spot where the Lycian exarch Demon Dread and his cadre of horrors once stood. In their place, the only thing remaining was the broken remnants of a very large marble head. Demonic blood still sizzled and burned in the stones below. Lycian exarch Demon Dread was quite dead. You single-handedly killed a Lycian exarch as a rank 7 monk, unassigned. Explain yourself. Yeah, I did. See, so I looked up there and I seen them big heads. So I flew up there using that scroll of fly. Boyd used Souldrinker to point towards the Great Wall. Then I used one of these scrolls I bought from the Stonemasons Guild to turn that big head's neck into mush. Boyd held up a stone-cutting scroll. Then I just sort of did a flying kick and knocked the head off. Boyd did his best flying kick imitation to provide context. Boyd shoved Souldrinker underneath the back of his shirt and wriggled equals it to scratch an itch on his back. Ouch. Shit, I nicked myself. Souldrinker pulsed red as the blood was absorbed into the blade. A maddening cackle erupted briefly from Souldrinker. And that resulted in this mess? Fleon motioned towards the mess in front of him. Do you have any idea the cost of one of these marble heads? If the local constables determine you are responsible for this, you will spend 20 years in the salt mines working your debt. 60 years. Fleon yelled, do not question my knowledge of the law. I am High Paladin. The sentence would be 20 years. Well, the first 2 missed, so 60 years. The first one rolled the wrong way, and there is another on the other side of the wall that sort of rocked its way over. That was before I figured out to give it a kick. Fleein bristled. As High Paladin of the Falari and leader of this foray into Zenith, I command you to stop single-handedly killing beings of untold horror. You are expressly forbidden from doing this. You will turn yourself in to the constabulary and pay for the damages, or I will take you there myself. I am still High Paladin. I will not stand for lawlessness. These actions are untenable. Oh, I already paid them back. Come again? Yeah, that lich guy had all sorts of shit in his house. I took it all and sold it. I bought this sword with the money. It's not Souldrinker, it's a different one. It's clearly Souldrinker. How stupid do you think I am? Boyd flipped Souldrinker over. Where Souldrinker had been scratched out, the other side was now etched, very poorly, with the words, "Bastard's Blade." Nah man, check this out. I bought this one. It's called the Bastard's Blade. Look here. Says right there. I named it after my daddy. Whom I obviously do not know. You spelled bastard wrong. Shit, I did? How do you spell it? Fleein looked at him critically. Alright, fine, it's Souldrinker. But now it's mine, and I call it the Bastard's Blade. Where's the rest of the money? I put everything I took back in the supply pack along with an additional few hundred for the scroll of fly. The rest I spent on the multi-classing cost at a training center. That shit's high as hell. Oh, I also spent a few hundred on getting this thing engraved. I took it to that blacksmith up the street there. Fleein sighed. First, this blade is demon-forged adamantine. I have no idea what he scratched it with, but it will be gone in a week or less. The blade will repair itself. Second, let's go get your money back from this charlatan. Third, you have rid of the world of a greater evil. As High Paladin of the Falari, I would be remiss if I didn't note that you performed this task in a loathsome fashion. While your methods are disgusting, I cannot fault you for your actions. As you have already made amends, I have decided your overall actions are good and lawful, despite the fact you have committed an atrocity against your own soul. By most rights and measures, I should still slay you where you stand for bonding with that abomination. Instead, I have decided I will purge the corruption from both you and your sword. I have added this to my oath. Fleein waved his hand and fiery letters burned in the air in front of him. At the bottom of a list of standard do-gooder nonsense was the sentence, "Purge Sir Boyd's corruption and liberate him from the grip of Souldrinker." Neat trick. Boyd said. And he believed you? Salia asked. So, what are you going to do with it? What's it called? Souldrinker. Salia scoffed, that's a dumb name. It's actually called Souldrinker, harbinger of boom, drinking the souls, the blood leaves, which got possessed by something or another, unholy deacon of something. That's both wrong and even worse. I meant the money though, I meant what are you going to do with the money? What are you going to do with the money? Salia asked. Soon as I find a decent blacksmith, I'm gonna fix this dumbass etching. I was trying to use a shard of the head that I kicked off the wall and Fleein was right, it looks like shit. Boyd was comfortable lying, but it was the first one he had intentionally told to the rest of the foray. It felt a little odd. Hey man, I'm back. Boyd walked into one of the merchants' houses he met while trying to find magical equipment earlier that day. He had almost passed it by. He had hoped to find some sort of magical armor, or a new weapon. This shop was one of the only ones that had things he could use. The shop was filled with random trinkets. This was disappointing, but he figured as he had no money at the time it might be for the best. There was the one item he thought he might have a use for though. Y'all still got that ring you told me about? The cosplayer's delight? Sure. I don't know what you want with it though. Seems like you might want to at least buy a new shirt before you invest in this. Nah, Def Leppard's awesome dude. I'll keep this one. I want that ring though. It's 6,000 gold. Deal. How do I use it again? Boyd threw the money on the counter and put the ring in his inventory. It will only work once, but when you are ready, just slip it on. Thanks man. Boyd inspected the ring again as he walked out the door. He wasn't sure it would work, but everyone needed a backup plan. He checked it in the bottom of his pack. Fleein shook Boyd awake. You may start making amends for your folly right now. There are a group of ruffians in the alley terrorizing a fair maiden. We will begin your sword training. Prepare yourself for battle. Fleein left the room clad in his golden mail, with the blade of light and majesty already drawn from its sheath. The others are out collecting mana nodes. I have been tasked with beginning your training. Let us commence. Boyd woke up, still holding Souldrinker. He had nicked himself several times on it at night, which the blade has absorbed, further reinforcing their noxious and evil bond. Boyd was unaware of this, but was annoyed with the nicks and cuts. Dude, I was sleeping. Evil does not sleep, Sir Boyd. Arise. Fine, you go do your slice and dice thing, and I'll just watch from the window. Nay, Sir Boyd, you will be defeating these ruffians yourself today. It is time you drew blood in battle. We must train. Boyd, terrified at first, looked down at Souldrinker. A thought came into his mind: fill my unquenchable thirst. Show them death. Boyd shrugged and threw on his shirt and walked out the door with Fleein and Souldrinker. As Fleein and Boyd approached the alley, Boyd noticed 7 ruffians surrounding someone who was labeled a fair maiden. From the look in their eyes, this was not an encounter she was interested in, or would enjoy. He realized she did indeed need help, and Fleein's intention was that Boyd provide it. The ruffians were all lower rank than Boyd, which seemed good. He was still hopeful Fleein would help him if he needed. Fleein nudged him forward. Sir Boyd, go protect that maiden's honor. Boyd walked forward. In a mostly non-threatening voice, he yelled, Hey! Stop you guys. He scolded himself for the weak effort. Boyd scanned the closest enemy. System, ruffian, rank 6. Your standard issue street thug. They harass people. They steal things. They aren't a big deal. This one is totally normal too. Trust me. Fleein again shoved Boyd forward. Sir Boyd, you must resist the temptation. Do not accept his extremely tempting and reasonable offer. Protect the innocent. Boyd turned abruptly. Wait, what? Resist, what temptation? Dude, you don't think I would seriously consider that, right? The ruffians, realizing Fleein and Boyd were distracted and not going to leave, had dispersed from the maiden and pulled a litany of weapons. She huddled in the corner and slowly began crawling towards Fleein. Realizing he had to defend himself, Boyd pulled Souldrinker from its scabbard and took a fighting stance. While he had multi-classed in Sword Soul, he had also invested in some basic training with greatswords. He had a reasonable idea of how to fight with one at this point, although he'd never actually hit anything alive. Fleein grabbed Boyd and began jerking his body around. Position your feet as so. You will want to take the high guard unless he rushes you, and then you will want to take a side guard, unless he's using daggers, and then you will want to simply use your skills to dodge the initial blow. Fleein was still talking when Boyd got his chance to use his newfound class. Almost immediately a ruffian rushed at him. The ruffian slashed twice and nicked Boyd's shoulder when he tried to dodge. Life, 43/47. You have a minor wound. Boyd spun through the slash and whirled Souldrinker around at the man's head. While he was off balance and the blow didn't strike true, Souldrinker easily cleaved a large slice between the man's spinal cord and the rest of him. He crumpled instantly. System, achievement unlocked, unholy knowledge of the blade. Your bond with Souldrinker has been strengthened through feeding it the blood of others. You now have access to Souldrinker's stat sheet and its skills. Souldrinker gains power as it collects more souls. As you increase your rank, Souldrinker will increase in power too. Congratulations! You bonded with a weapon of unlimited unholy power as long as you can keep it happy. Souldrinker can hold the souls of up to 5,000 entities. Each of its many powers costs between 10 and 100 souls to use. As long as Souldrinker holds souls, you will remain uncorrupted, but watch out. Using Souldrinker without a soul will result in your corruption. If you reach 1000 corruption, the blade will absorb your entire being and you will spend eternity in a wretched hell within the blade, as almost all who have wielded it before you. Souldrinker loses 1 soul per day. Currently, 2, 450/5,000 souls. You may never unequip this item if you are a sword soul. Souldrinker has initiated a conversation with you. Do you accept? Boyd mentally thought yes. Harvest. Reap. Corrupt. Feed. What could only be called a menu popped into Boyd's vision when he focused on Souldrinker. Boyd mentally noted that all of the aforementioned words had corresponding skills associated with them. Boyd mentally activated the harvest skill. The second nearest ruffian had closed in on Boyd and was preparing a fatal strike with his shillelagh. As he reared back, Souldrinker leapt in Boyd's hands and impaled the ruffian through the eye. Blood showered the front of Boyd's def leopard shirt. Souldrinker pulsed and the stain coagulated and flew into the blade as it pulsed with demonic power. Boyd, now with limited control over his hands and body, was further pulled into action by Souldrinker. He rapidly impaled each of the ruffians through some critical organ as he deftly dodged their blows, Souldrinker pulling him in each direction. In mere seconds, all of the ruffians were dead. Flean clapped at his performance. Fine work, Sir Boyd, fine work indeed. Reap. Boyd, thrilled by the fact he still existed and dizzy due to the whirl of battle, mentally clicked on Reap without a second thought. Souldrinker pulsed with power and ethereal spirits rose from the ruffians' bodies. The fair maiden screamed in terror. Yes, well, I am definitely not seeing this as if I saw what I think I just saw. I would be forced to act, and thus I will be looking this way instead. Flean growled and then grabbed the fair maiden and turned his back on the scene. Corrupt. Boyd mentally clicked corrupt on his sword menu and the ethereal spirits of the ruffians writhed in agony. They stopped moving and were suspended as tendrils extended from the tip of the blade into the spirits themselves. Indeed, looking this direction is preventing me from seeing something I can't unsee that would require me to slay my new squire Sir Boyd, so I am definitely focused over here in this direction. Flean sounded increasingly angry. Feed. Boyd mentally clicked on feed and the tendrils began to pulse. The spirits quickly evaporated. Currently, 2, 378/5,000 souls. Would you like to Souldrinker to harvest, reap, corrupt, and feed from all souls you destroy while within its malignant embrace? Y/N. Boyd mentally clicked Y. He was notoriously poor on following up on things, so automation was his friend. He wasn't the brightest bulb, but when his bank had set up automatic bill pay, it had been a godsend. Automatic soul reap should be useful too. Boyd realized that he had taken a net loss on souls during the fight but hadn't thought of the implication. Ah well, there would always be more bad guys out there in the world, he thought. Boyd, never strong in math, assumed that the next batch would result in a gain of souls and failed to acknowledge the fact this might yield problems in the future. System, you have gained 70 experience, 60 bonus experience. You have achieved an additional rank. Would you like to spend your points in Monk, Unassigned, or Sword Soul? Boyd picked Sword Soul. Would you like to make this your default choice? Y/N. Boyd clicked Y. You are now a rank 5 Sword Soul. You gain 1 attribute point. You gain 5 skill in Greatswords. Your bond with your chosen weapon, Souldrinker, Harbinger of Doom, Drinker of Souls, the Blood Slave, that which was possessed by he who is doomed, unholy beacon of the endless night, the wretched finger of Bahil of the 9th layer of hell, has strengthened. You gain 5 additional skill in Greatswords as long as you wield Souldrinker. You have learned Parry. You have learned Unholy Parry. Boyd investigated the icon for Greatswords to figure out exactly what 5 points did. Hey Flean, I ranked up again. I got more points in Greatswords, so I do more damage now. Also now I know other stuff. Boyd wasn't sure what Unholy Parry was, but assumed Flean would not approve. I am proud of you, Sir Boyd. You did not once stop to ogle the fair maiden's exposed shoulder while you dispatched those foes. Flean glanced over at the fair maiden. While on our holy quest, we must expel impure thoughts. We cannot satiate our manly desires on pristine, untouched flesh. Only degenerates embrace these ideas and enter the brothels and whores' dens that line the canals. The what? Also her shoulder? I didn't even notice. What does that even have to do with ranking up? Boyd asked. You said this at the canals? We might need to circle back on this one. Boyd asked. Indeed. Flean answered. And you fair maiden, may I return you from whence you came? I honor your chasteness in these trying times, milady. I promise thee safe passage. Thank you, milord, she replied. I live just down the street, my father is a simple flower merchant. Can you accompany me? She smiled coyly at Flean. I've taken no such vow, milord, the young maiden said as she smiled coyly. Flean stared at the maiden for an overly long period, his gaze glancing up and down. Sir Boyd. I have to retreat to my room immediately. I require prayer. Please return the maiden on your own. Do not come in my room. I am very busy in prayer. Pay no attention to any noises. Those are prayers. Flean then left hurriedly in an uncomfortable walk. Boyd looked at the fair maiden and sighed. All right, which house is it? The maiden grabbed his arm and nudged him along the path. Third house on the right, milord. Boyd and the maiden walked together down the cobblestone street, her arm in his. She walked slowly and made small talk. Boyd, not being one for small talk and with little understanding of courtly romance, was anxious to get her home so he could read about unholy Perry, which he was unfamiliar with, but very interested in. When they arrived at her house, the fair maiden said, Would you like to come inside, Sir Boyd? My father is not home. Boyd's mind was still adrift in the ideas of what might make a Perry unholy. Notably, he didn't understand what a Perry was to begin with, and had actually misread both the words as party and unholy party. Partying he was highly familiar with, but he wasn't sure if unholy party was something he could participate in or not. He was desperate to get to the bottom of what he thought might be the first useful skills he had acquired. He was also hungry though. You got anything to eat? He asked. The fair maiden giggled, Of course, Sir Boyd, I've never had a knight in my home. I've never even had a man in my home when my father wasn't here. She curtsied and ushered him in the house and offered him a bowl of mixed colorful fruits. He wasn't sure what any of them were, but was always up for trying new foods, particularly when he was hungry. Boyd entered the house and set Souldrinker down beside him after taking a seat at the small table full of fruits. He did take a bit of an apple-esque one, but found it tart. He next tried a larger purple globe, which he found delicious. Food in the maze and on the Filari ship hadn't agreed with him thus far, so he rapidly began devouring them. The fair maiden reappeared. She had removed her vest and let down her hair. She was wearing a simple skirt and a sheer white blouse that left little to the imagination, particularly as it hung off the shoulder that Flean had noticed. Sir Boyd, would you have any interest in accompanying me to my quarters? I'm just so scared after those horrible men tried to hurt me. I'd feel safer if you carried me. She shimmied and smiled at the end of her sentence. Boyd looked at her and was immediately confused as his vision blurred. You have resisted a major illusion, intelligence, love, uncultured swine. The house melted away and the purple globe that Boyd had been holding rotted away in his hand, leaving a stinking piece of decaying fruit. The flowers inside the home wilted and a stench radiated throughout the air. The fair maiden's beautiful exterior faded, leaving in place a hag. The hag's body was covered in scraps of hair and blood and grease-stained robes. She had no legs, but rather had a stalk-like body that shimmied across the floor. She left piles of greasy miasma wherever she moved. She cackled as she raised her cane at Boyd. A glob of green acid leapt from the tip of her cane and struck him in the face. Life 2447. You are losing 1 life/minute to acid. You are losing 1 life/minute to hag's miasma. System, Hag, rank 33. The Hag is a mixture of witch, necromancer, and swamp creature. Their magic is derived from many sources, but typically involves rot and decay. You can think of them as gross sentient bog water and muck that can use magic spells. Much like Be Real from Cypress Hill, they have illusions and will gladly share those with you, so I wouldn't trust your vision when they are around. Unlike most gross piles of spellcasting pond scum, they only eat meat, i.e. you. 2 more green globs shot forth from her cane as the Hag continued to try and blast him with acid. Without any better means of dodging them, Boyd rolled backwards onto the floor, with both piles of acid narrowly missing him. He cracked his head on the hard ground. Life 2247, you are losing 1 life/minute to acid. You are losing 1 life/minute to Hag's miasma. You are losing 1 life/minute to a minor head wound. More acid appeared on the horizon and was heading towards him. He rolled underneath the table and the acid barely missed. He wasn't sure how much more acid he could take, so he grabbed Souldrinker and hoped it would do the thing where it took hold again. Nothing happened though. Oh shit, reap. Nothing happened, although it was a prime opportunity for another acid blast, which Boyd took in the chest. Life 847. You are losing 3 life/minute to acid. You are losing 1 life/minute to Hag's miasma. You are losing 1 life/minute to a minor head wound. Boyd had fallen behind the table and was now wiping acid off himself while he edged around the table. Boyd, unable to determine what to do, boldly threw his sword at her with all his might. It missed wide and he realized this was a poor decision. Between his limited sword skills and the lack of cooperation from Souldrinker, he figured this was probably the end of him. The Hag cackled yet again. I had hoped to ensnare your friend. His holy essence would enable me for years, but you will feed me for the time being. I will thrive off your rotted corpse. She slowly wriggled her way around the table, trying to get Boyd in range of her acid projectile. Boyd's vision went to white and he realized this was probably heaven. He saw a shining man in golden armor he assumed was St. Peter. It was not St. Peter. It was Flean. Death to your necromancy, Hag. The Hag stumbled backwards, firing acid bolts at Flean's chest, but they fell harmlessly to the ground. He hefted the blade of light and majesty and struck downwards, easily cleaving the Hag in two. Boyd, unable to determine what was happening from the blinding light of Flean's spell, shifted helplessly along the ground. He felt a warm glow over him and realized Flean was healing him. Life 4747. Sir Boyd. While I was finishing my prayers by myself alone in my room, I happened to notice the corpses of the ruffians you defeated had devolved into fungi. Classical, haggish necromancy. I traced you to this building. I admire your bravery attempting to destroy a rank 33 hag by yourself, but you should have come and retrieved me. We could have defeated this evil together. I am sure you did this to protect that fair maiden. Thank you, Sir Boyd, for your dedication to the service of light and majesty. The fair maiden was the Hag. Nay, Sir Boyd. The fair maiden was chaste and good. I would have noticed her illusion. The Hag must have trapped her somewhere in the house. We should find her. Nah. I seen her transform. The whole thing was a trap, man. She was baiting you outside with the ruffians, because she wanted your holy essence or some such shit. She almost got me. Flean, is everything here trying to kill me? Flean nodded affirmatively, yes. Most certainly. But that means when I was praying I was thinking of. Flean adjusted his armor. It matters not, Sir Boyd. Let us return to our inn. Boyd stood up, expecting intense pain, but was noticeably fine. Those healing spells sure are useful. Indeed, Sir Boyd, indeed. Flean was clearly distracted by something, but Boyd couldn't quite place it. Boyd was laying on his bed when the thunder hit again. He knew what to expect this time. Xena was sitting in front the same desk as last time. I didn't ambush any gorplings though. Well, it's not that then, is it? Figure it out. Can't you just tell me? No, look, This action alone is probably going to get me in a lot of shit, so let's make this fast. You're a ticking time bomb. You're too stupid not to die to some sort of control spell fairly soon. I originally assumed that your dick would be what got you killed, but apparently your stupidity is unmatched. There is no way you should have survived that encounter with the hag. Your overly pious joke of a high paladin is only marginally better, so we need to make some fixes. Flean actually gave me an idea for a clever solution for at least one of your problems, although Zenith only knows how we are going to fix your brain. When you awake, I need you to go to Flean and say the following thing exactly. It was their third day in Portcullis, and they had nearly collected enough mana nodes. Boyd and Flean had contributed only a single mana node so far, but the others were well on their way to completion. They were sitting in the common room together, discussing the plans for the day. Yeah, the queen herself. I was just walking down the street and there she was in front of me and she was like, "Hey, are you an adventurer?" And I sure am, and she was like, "Y'all got a minute? This place down on the Canal District is full of demons and we need to clear it out," and I was, "Sure, I can do that," and she was like, "Thanks Boyd," and then I left. Came straight here. Thought you'd want to know being our leader and all. Flean turned towards the window. He tried to look pensive. A quest from the queen herself. You surprise me, Sir Boyd. Your legend grows if the Queen of Portcullis herself has requested you. Where, might I ask, did she send you? Boyd pulled a piece of paper out of his pocket. It says, "The Palace of Unbridled Lust." Boyd held up a hand. I get it, bud. Let's focus on the quest. Yes, your wisdom exceeds your meager and pathetic statistics. Let us go forth as fellow combatants. The gathering of mana nodes can wait. We will first purge this palace of sin of its filth. I probably won't need my armor, so I will just leave that here and proceed only in my skivvies, which is a normal thing to do in this case, and you should not question this action or assume it is duplicitous. Upon arriving, we should definitely split up to make sure that we cover as much ground as possible. Boyd's ears perked up. Yeah, it says here this is a solo mission. It says it can't be completed by more than just me. By a queen's decree. Also, man, I think you should find a dictionary or whatever they have here and look up the word repressed. You might have some issues. Flean cleared his throat. I have never heard of such a thing. I am sure you would never lie to me though, Sir Boyd, and thus I respect your decision. Just know that if you run into any demonesses whose wiles attempt to corrupt your noble heart, I am always available to smite evil. Just as I saved you from that wretched hag, I will come and purify the filthy demonesses from this land. Sure, yeah. Hey look, I will probably need some gold in order to give to all the women that I liberate from the palace. I figure many of them will need gold to get by before we usher them off to church or whatever. So maybe I take like 1,000 gold coins with me? For this noble task. I will personally donate 2,000 gold from my own war chest. Boyd's eyes got larger. 2,000, huh? Just how big is your war chest? I am High Paladin of the Filari. I control almost unlimited quantities of gold if the cause be just and righteous. Oh yeah? 'Cause for 5,000 gold I could probably liberate even more souls. Your bravery and charity is immense, Sir Boyd. 5,000 gold it shall be. Flean counted out bags of gold and hefted them onto the table in front of them. The table sagged under the weight. Great, so I am just gonna run on down there and get to proselytizing and whatnot and run them demons off. Why don't you wait here? I shall stand guard for as long as it takes, Flean said. Yeah, 'cause it might be a while. I don't know how many demons I am going to have to fight or how long it will take to convince these poor souls to give up their awful lifestyle and return to the loving arms of whoever it is you like. Flean stood up. Take as long as you need, Sir Boyd. Your mission's importance cannot be understated. While I am a combatant now, I will be High Paladin of the Filari as long as I draw breath. Saving and purifying the souls of the people remains my highest priority and my guiding light. Please take copious notes of your adventure and be prepared to share them with me upon your return. I will need to know the exact degree to which of these sullen whores exposed her body to anyone who would look. I will need to fully understand just how many acts of depravity each woman had performed, and extensive details of how they perform these acts, but only because I will try to atone for their sins directly through offerings to Ior. If you can provide me with detailed pictures that capture the entirety of the acts, including the more ravenous parts, I will. Boyd slipped out the door as Fleon continued to talk. Boyd followed the map exactly. The Palace of Unbridled Lust was nothing to note on the outside, but decadent on the inside. A scent he couldn't place beckoned him forward when he found the door. The perfume radiated throughout the building. It left him tumescent. Boyd entered a small alcove with nothing other than a single woman at a large desk. The woman was fully nude. She looked largely human, although she was obviously some other race. Her blue skin outlined a number of well-defined curves such that she would be defined as voluptuous in human terms. Her thick, long, red and orange hair extended from her head almost to the floor and hid the majority of her body. She was smiling seductively. Boyd examined her top to bottom and tried to ascertain exactly what part of her was for sex and what part of her wasn't, ultimately coming to the conclusion that she might not be exactly what he was looking for, but beggars can't be choosers, and if this was the only option, she would do. Welcome to Palace of Unbridled Lust. How may I serve you? She hissed in a sultry voice. Boyd smiled back and hefted the entirety of his newfound fortune on the counter. What does 5,000 gold buy me? System, new inherent ability gained, X3. You have unlocked a new inherent ability, till the break of dawn. What you lack in speed and size, you make up for in vigor and veracity. You are unaffected by physical exhaustion. You have unlocked a new inherent ability, TAF copy. You have exerted a surprising amount of control over a succubus through uncommon and skillful means. You are unaffected by mind control spells that rely on seduction. You have unlocked a new inherent ability, Super Freak. Your openness to new experiences has made you less susceptible to being surprised. You cannot be surprised by an enemy, even if you were unaware of their presence before. Boyd stumbled out of the Palace of Unbridled Lust nearly a day later. His pores were steeped in a variety of what he had been told were vital essences, but what Boyd had come to view as space drugs. He had little recognition of the previous hours. He remembered flesh. He remembered pleasure. His genitals hurt. It wasn't just his dick though, pain literally reverberated throughout his body. System, you have gained 540 bonus experience points from stuff. Seriously, I don't even want to talk about it. Dude. Gross. Do you even have boundaries? I've been doing this a long time and even I'm a little appalled. Let's just drop it. You got the experience, and that's that. No more discussion. You are now rank 6 Sword Soul, sicko. You have gained 2 attribute points, too bad you can't spend them on basic decency. You have gained 5 points of skill in greatswords. You are now rank 7 Sword Soul. You have gained 1 attribute point. You should have gained 2, but I am taking 1 away because I had to watch that shit and I can't unsee it. You have gained 5 points of skill in greatswords. This isn't a pun, don't crack wise with me, or I am taking this one too. Life, 14 of 72. You are deeply dehydrated. You are starving. You are suffering from hollylock poisoning, your intelligence has been reduced by half. You are suffering from cloakweed poisoning, you are hallucinating. You are suffering from dopaswell poisoning, your agility has been cut by half. You are diseased, you are suffering from demon cholera. You are diseased, you are suffering from rock rot. You are diseased, you are suffering from. Boyd quit reading. It seemed like none of this would kill him, and thus he decided he would just call it a hangover and move on. He limped back to the inn, desperately trying to avoid having to pee as it cost him several life to do so. Fleon sprung from his chair. You're back, Sir Boyd. What news? Has the Palace of Unbridled Lust been liberated? All 5 combatants sat in the same room for the first time in a few days. Boyd noticed the group's mana array was glowing and read 50/50s. That was a good sign. The group was now staring at him critically, all sets of eyes and sensors and anus/vents upon him. Jellybean Jenkins smelled the air. This one stinks of demon sweat and human hormones. It has been breeding. Salia, in a rare instance where she was outside of her VMR, fluttered over to Boyd. He's right, you reek of sulfur and self-pity. You need a shower. Flean stood and clapped Boyd on the shoulder. I am sure you are mistaken. Sir Boyd was on a holy mission, to cleanse the palace of its sin, weren't you good sir? Boyd had never felt bad lying to priests, but the look on Flean's face was too much to bear. Flean, I have to admit that I faltered in my mission. Flean gritted his teeth in anger. Sir Boyd, please say you didn't let the demons defile you? Salia returned to the VMR, which lit up. A light focused on Boyd's crotch. It appears like he spent the last couple of days barebacking succubi. You didn't even use protection? With succubi? Are you suicidal? Oh wait, the lights on Salia's VMR shone brightly and then refocused on Boyd's midsection. Oh my god, a rock golem? What did you ever do together? How did you even do things together? Boyd said sheepishly, we mostly just talked. You realize I just scanned your genitals, right? Unless you have a mouth down there I don't know about, you definitely did more than talk. Salia bristled, no one leave me alone with this guy unless I am in my VMR, I no longer trust him. Hold on Salia, it ain't like that. Y'all are pretty quick to judge here, maybe I was just making my first trip there to scout it out. I plan on going back and finishing what I started. I was laying the groundwork for the next stage of the mission. You laid something all right, Salia said. Flean sharply punched the table with a gloved fist. I am heartened to hear of your successful reconnaissance, Sir Boyd, but I fear that I must intercede. If you have been cavorting with these demonesses, I have to mark your quest as failed. It pains me to do this, but you have clearly lost sight of your goals. Flean gazed blankly at nothing for a few seconds, before saying, strange, Sir Boyd, I do not see the quest in your quest log. Oh, yeah, it already did the failed thing, and it disappeared I think. It's gone now. Bummer huh? Flean straightened himself, you shame our foray. I will pray to the goddess tonight for forgiveness for halting your divine mission, but we must sally forth and commit to our first descent. We do not have time to repeat this quest. While you were away, our fellow combatants have filled our first mana array. This means we can travel to the dissension chamber. Because we are so very far behind our intended pace due to your unfortunate lack of movement abilities, we should discuss how far we will initially descend. As you are all aware, we can descend to anything between the 2nd and 10th floor. 10th floor, Jellybean Jenkins said. Gmol's rune became a thumbs-up sign. All 10, Salia agreed. Flean said, I also feel this is most appropriate. We should attempt to catch up to the higher level groups. Most of the first 10 floors will be devoid of mana, as we have observed here. We need to get back ahead of the primary pack. Sounds good, Boyd said. When do we leave? It became very silent in the room. Gmol's stomach runes lit up, but Boyd couldn't quite tell what they said. I will tell him then. Human, because you are weak and untrained, you will struggle to survive the 10th floor. The maze becomes increasingly more difficult at a dramatic pace as we descend. If we were to go a single floor down, your current power level would leave you with the potential for success. On the 10th floor, you will be a miserable weakling. Your only hope is that you are capable of quickly gaining experience to increase your rank, but Gmol's presence will hamper this. The 10th floor will provide a modest challenge for the rest of us, and we will not have time to watch you dawdle or protect you from insignificant dangers. In addition, it is likely we will encounter other forays, potentially even those that are hostile to us. Were this the case, your only hope of survival would be an outright and dominant victory due the rest of our prowess, or that your ridiculous inherent ability somehow mitigated your instantaneous death into some miraculous recovery. So maybe we just go down a single floor then? Hey wait, didn't you tell me I could just exit and go back to Oklahoma? Why do I have to descend at all? Where is the exit if we have enough mana? Your ineptitude has left our pace sluggish and without the needed mana to sustain the pack. You will continue with us. I will not waste what has been gained on you. That's not what you said. You told me you'd send me back to Oklahoma. Jellybean Jenkins rushed across the room and grabbed Boyd by the throat. He held him aloft as Boyd kicked his feet. And now, I say you will continue. You will not jeopardize my plans. Boyd struggled and desperately looked towards the others. None of them seemed particularly interested in helping. Help! Boyd struggled through the choking. Jellybean, please. Boyd struggled to wave his fists as Jellybean Jenkins' grip tightened. Who is my special boy? Jellybean Jenkins' eyes flashed and he had a sudden change of heart. I have acted in haste. This is not the behavior of a good boy. I will unhand you. Jellybean Jenkins set Boyd on the ground. I am a good boy, correct? Boyd, desperate to stay alive, choked out a few sentences. Yes, good boy. Good boy Jellybean Jenkins. What? I share the name of my human family. I am Jellybean Jenkins. Boyd, still struggling to breathe, said Jenkins. Jellybean Jenkins. Thank you. Jellybean Jenkins said. He walked back to his seat at the table. His tail jutted through a hole in the back of the chair, where it was furiously wagging. Flean nodded in agreement. There is no discussion needed, Salia. As leader of the foray, the choice is mine, and I agree. Boyd, you can come with us or not. If you have issues with Jellybean Jenkins, you will need to take care of those separately. We leave for the dissension chamber in the morning. Everyone get a good night's rest. Sir Boyd, you are welcome to leave with us in the morning. You may choose to exit or descend. I will leave that choice to you. Boyd slept little that night. Neither choice seemed particularly favorable. Also his dick burned and he kept vomiting small chunks of rock. The noise became frustrating enough that Gmol eventually cured most of his diseases, and he fell into a deep and peaceful sleep. He awoke a few hours later. Rockrot hits you for 5 damage. Rockrot cannot be cured without essence of earth. Boyd said aloud, I guess that one is going to stick a while. Flean commenced his prayer and was instantly transported before Ior. Her light was so bright that he bowed his head and took a knee. The Falari couldn't look upon Ior's true form, no one could. He merely basked in the infinite brightness of her sitting atop her throne. Her presence always filled him with joy. He loved her in every way possible. He worshipped her as a god. She bestowed upon him her terrifying and holy might. She was a warrior at his side. She was his shield and his sword. She was power. He worshipped her beauty. Ior's light shone so brightly no one had seen her form. Even still, Flean knew that she was perfection. When he imagined her, when he dared to think of the day she might let him hold her, she was perfection. Elegant. Graceful. Lithe. Flawless. He worshipped her as a mother. Ior was the source of the Falari's position in the universe. Her light provided for their entire race. They owed her everything. She was the nurturer, the provider, and even the source of their sustenance. Ior was the guiding light of his life. He would do anything for her. He was hers. My goddess, thank you for answering my prayers. Ior's voice boomed throughout the chamber. Surely Flean of the Falari. You are my high paladin. My goddess, I know I have no right to doubt your benevolence, but I have doubts about our last conversation. The one called Boyd continually brings shame upon our foray. He is neither righteous nor. Ior's voice boomed, you are correct, Sir Flean, you do not have the right to doubt my words. You are also correct about our new friend Sir Boyd. He is lost in this world. He has no one to guide him. He needs your help and your mercy. Flean bowed his head to the ground. My goddess, I have been contacted by others who wish to join our foray. Others who could replace Sir Boyd. If I were allowed to remove him from the foray, or perhaps force his removal. Ior's light dimmed ever so slightly, Flean felt her warmth fade. He felt her love for him wane. He immediately regretted his words. My lady, I am so sorry, I did not mean to offend even slightly. While you foray in the name of my daughter the Empress, you know as well as I that your foray truly belongs to me. When you speak of slaying someone in your own foray, Sir Flean, you speak of slaying a part of me. Is this your wish? Flean cowered. No, my goddess. I would never. You are the High Paladin of the Falari, correct? Ior asked. I serve at your behest, my goddess. Then serve. Ashamed, Flean began to weep. Yes, my goddess. You may not slay the one they call Boyd. You must watch over him. We have use for him yet. Yes, my goddess. Teach him respect for the soul. Teach him to use the sword. Make him valuable. We cannot give up on him just yet. Yes, my goddess. But Flean, if he betrays us, you may not kill him, but you may do as you please. Flean brushed the tears from his eyes. A smile crept onto his face. Thank you, my goddess. You are dismissed. Flean disappeared from the chamber. This one was particularly sniveling. Many had served as High Paladin, but this one was amongst the worst. His skills at combat were remarkable for a meager creature, but his petulant whining irked it to its core. It wished for his death, but there was no suitable replacement, not yet. The writhing mass flickered and the light in the chamber went back to zero. It struggled to find a comfortable position to wait. It was bound to its shackle. It could never leave this room. Simply operating its basic functions required a level of mana that was only available in one's place. A place to which it was now chained. It wanted to leave. It wanted to move. It needed help. The foray system had worked for centuries, letting the Falari bring it small meals and snacks. To leave this prison, Ior needed more. It needed a nearly infinite sustainable mana source. It needed direct access to Zenith itself. Then it wouldn't need the Falari, it wouldn't need anything at all. It had been millennia since it held that sort of power, since it roamed the universe doing anything it wanted. Since it bent and broke populations, forcing them to bask in adulation or die in agony. It was patient. It had waited millennia. It could wait more. Ior was bound, but the binds were loosening, and things were falling into place. The foray left the inn and marched through the city. The dissension chamber was in the middle of Portcullis, near the inn where the group stayed. How does this work? Boyd asked. Flean spoke, we insert our mana array into the dissension chamber. Dissension is really a nebulous term here as we will not necessarily move downwards, and in fact, we may actually move up. It only means we will move on to more difficult levels. It will allow us to descend 1 floor per 5 mana we give it. We will receive 5 mana in return and all of us will descend to the 10th floor. At that point, our maximum capacity for our mana array will be raised to 500 and we will have 5 mana nodes remaining. Each mana node we tap will still be worth a single point, but after the 5th floor, there are commonly nodes grouped together. The 10th floor is a dramatic step up in difficulty. Not only will there be significantly more monsters, but they will be much higher level. Because Gmol is with us, you will still only receive a single experience point, which will suppress your level compared to the surrounding environment. More simply put, level 1 was of no threat to any of us. Level 2 would be much the same. At level 10, you stand a real chance of dying. That sucks. And if I exit? Your life is your own. You may use a piece of the mana to exit. The Falari have no use for outsiders though. I have requested they give you safe passage, but to where would be up to you. As you are aware, we cannot return you to Earth. The choice hadn't changed. Boyd was increasingly worried that Jellybean wasn't going to hold up his end of the bargain, but the only people he still knew in the universe were in front of him. Also, the maze had pretty awesome whorehouses, which had shaken his worldview, but also liberated him in more ways than one. Flean was extremely uptight about anything fun, so Boyd figured staying with the Falari was never a real option anyway, and he couldn't very well go live with the hummingbirds or the wolves, so he had to stay. For now. off we go then. The dissension chamber was a short walk away in the middle of town. Boyd was made to understand this would not normally be the case, but dissension from the first floor was expected, and thus little fanfare would be required. Fleein explained there likely would have been a boss-type monster here for the first group, but that creature would have been killed days ago. Instead, it was now an open path to the reliquary that would allow them to descend. So what's the boss monster that's usually here called? Hateforge the Disemboweler, Salia said. Sounds ominous. He is forged from hatred and likes to disembowel things. It sounds exactly like what it is, Salia said. Yeah, I guess so. Boyd said. Salia scowled at him and the group continued down the long corridor to the reliquary of dissension. They passed the large body of a creature covered in pustules and boils. Next to it lay a tool that looked prime for disemboweling. Boyd made the connection quickly and decided it was for the best this thing was dead. The tunnel had opened up into a large cavern lined in a mixture of metal bits and pieces and glowing wires. Boyd awed at the construction. It was a seamless connection between rock and metal. Between wire and stone. He stared all over his surroundings, until what appeared to be a large weasel skittered at the sight of his vision. Hey, what are these weasel things? What are you speaking of, Sir Boyd? Fleein asked. You speak of spookrats. They are not pets. They are foul little rodents who serve no purpose. There are none in this area. I would smell them, Jellybean Jenkins said. I'm literally looking at like 5 of them. Boyd held his hand around 3 feet off the ground. They're like this tall, brown fur, they got spears, they got little black hands. Them right there. Dude, that's definitely a pet. I can train that for sure. It's adorable. I'm gonna go try to pet one. Wait, now they're running towards us from behind. Wait a minute. Oh shit. Oh shit. Gmul, I think that one is gonna stab you. Boyd hefted his swords above his head and swung it as hard as he could. The spookrat was lightly armored, but the weight of Souldrinker was too much. It crashed into the side of the small creature and opened a ferocious wound. Blood soaked into the sword directly from the wound and the spookrat crumbled to the ground. Boyd lifted Souldrinker and stabbed downwards into the spookrat's face several times. Souldrinker continued to glow. When Boyd raised the blade out of her, it automatically harvested and reaped her soul. You have gained 1 experience. System, achievement unlocked, combatant killer. You killed a fellow combatant. You realize this isn't a joke, right? That thing had a family. You can't make excuses on this one. They were here to support their clan and help their people. Just so you know, spookrats depend on this whole deal too. There are billions of them and they need this shit to survive. You probably just effectively kill lewd like a billion spookrats. It's one thing to knock off a few gorplings, but damn dude. Why? Spookrats never did shit to you. All the same, you have gained 250 bonus experience. Murder is fun. System, achievement unlocked, reputation reviled, spookrats. You are now reviled by all spookrats in the universe. There are 36.4 billion of them and all of them hate you and that will never change. They don't even know about the brothel either. You have gained 10 bonus experience. System, you are now rank 8, Sword Soul. You have gained 2 attribute points. You have gained 5 skill points in Greatsword. You are now a journeyman Greatsword user. Fleein looked at Boyd. Goddess, save me. He's still high as a kite. Gmul, can you please remove the effects of the lichenweed from him? The poor thing is hallucinating. The rune in Gmul's stomach flashed through a number of symbols. Well, look again then, he's clearly under the effects of something. Cleanse the poor boy's mind, use a more powerful version if you have to do so, we'll recoup all our spells when we descend. Boyd was already off though. The spookrats were fast. The nearest one was glowing purple in between Salia, Fleein, and Jellybean Jenkins. Boyd narrowly missed it with his sword before the spell finished. Salia, Flean, and Jellybean Jenkins ran in terror. As soon as they did, Boyd could tell what he was dealing with. System: Snarl, King of the Spookrats, rank 82, combatant. Glower, Prince of the Spookrats, rank 67, combatant. Captain Scowl, Spookrat Captain, rank 92, combatant. Lord Grimace, Spookrat Duke, rank 51, combatant. Laying on the ground behind him was System: Princess Pout, Spookrat Princess, rank 88, combatant, deceased. Boyd looked around expecting his team to quickly annihilate the entirety of the Spookrat clan, but this was not the case. In fact, Flean, Jellybean Jenkins, and Salia in her VMR were all running around in a panic with their hands in the air. At the same time, multiple Spookrats were stabbing Gmul, who was having extreme trouble dodging their blows and was trying to heal himself through their attacks. For the first time, Boyd realized he could see his fellow combatants' life pools. Gmul's life would plummet and then immediately rise quickly back to the top after every stab. One of the Spookrats let out a loud squeak, and then all four of them suddenly turned into mirrored copies such that 4 Spookrats became 20 Spookrats. All of them were now furiously stabbing Gmul, who was alternately healing himself and trying to blast them away. Gmul's runes flashes, but Boyd couldn't read them. Instead, he just charged the nearest patch of Spookrats and swung Souldrinker as mightily as he could. It passed directly through the mirrored images and did nothing. Boyd fell down from the weight of his swing. He was blown backwards from the force of an explosion centered around Gmul, who had projected the runes in his stomach towards the sky. "Wake up, Jellybean Jenkins. You can't do shit to these things, and I can't either. We aren't fast enough to hit them. They'll dodge everything you try." "How?" Boyd screamed. "He's surprised. You'll have to deal damage to him to roust him, or he'll just run around with his hands in the air until it fades." Gmul's runes flashes in the sky. The 4 Spookrats again descended on Gmul, with stabbing and slashing. Jellybean Jenkins was halfway down the chamber at this point and running further. Boyd wasn't sure why this was the case, but he trusted Gmul's instinct if nothing else. The slime was being rapidly stabbed, and even with the level disparity, wouldn't be able to hold out forever. Boyd dashed down the hallway after Jellybean Jenkins. His eyes were glazed over white and he moved erratically. Not knowing what else to do, Boyd turned his sword to the flat of the blade and slapped Jellybean Jenkins across the back of the head with it with all his might. His health meter dipped a tiny bit. Jellybean Jenkins immediately turned around. His face, currently a mix of wolf and man, started to contort and twist. His lower jaw extended. His eyes widened and turned black as pitch. Boyd cowered as he raised his claw. "Good dog. Good boy, Jellybean. Hey, look over there, buddy. Those bad guys are hurting Gmul. Can you get the bad guys, handsome boy?" Jellybean Jenkins slammed his claw into the ground and howled with fury. A small red moon dripping with blood magically appeared in the air above him. The blood fell on his body and colored his fur. His eyes glowed red and his body expanded to almost double in size, mats of fur and blood and flesh falling off of him as he grew. Boyd wasn't sure if dogs and Spookrats were natural enemies or not, but he was very sure that the Spookrats were even more scared of Jellybean Jenkins than he was. As soon as he howled, they ran in all 4 directions simultaneously, all of them heading for shadows. Jellybean Jenkins pounced from afar and caught the first of the bunch in his mouth. He crunched the base of the creature's neck and left it for dead. 2 quick bounds and a leap and he slashed with both of his axes at the hamstring of the second Spookrat. It fell to the ground and began limping towards the shadows. Jellybean Jenkins roared at Boyd and motioned towards the Spookrat. Boyd sauntered over towards where it lay and kicked its spear away and then delivered a single overhead chop to end its life. One of the Spookrats had disappeared, but the other one was currently in Jellybean Jenkins' paws. He was pulling at its head and tail as it screamed. Boyd heard the sickening pop of the creature's neck as its vertebrae detached from one another. Jellybean Jenkins threw the corpse at the last fleeing member of the Spookrat tribe. "Do not let it get away. Jellybean Jenkins screamed. I don't know how to do that, Boyd screamed back. Several explosions were heard at the other end of the chamber, and Salia slid emerged with the charred corpse of a spookrat in the VMR's hands. Got it, she said. You have gained 4 experience. System, you have eliminated a combatant group, snarls Spookrats. You gain 4 experience. You have gained 50 bonus experience. 97 forays remain. Jellybean Jenkins bayed at the top of his lungs, and Boyd's blood curdled. You, human, how did you know the Spookrats were there? I saw them. With my eyes. I pointed them out multiple times. I literally asked you guys over and over what the weasel things were, and Flean said I was on crankweed or something. Which, just for the record, I would gladly try if you happen to have some. Jellybean Jenkins scowled. This doesn't make sense. How did you detect that which I could not smell? Oh yeah, I think I can do that. I mean, I know I can now. Salia had made the trip back down the hallway and stood next to the group. She threw the spookrat corpse at the ground in front of them. I checked him already. Look. She flipped a shiny purple ring in the air and caught in her hand. System, spooky ring. You and your kin are able to surprise other creatures as if you are rank 5000 no matter your current rank. Only usable by Spookrats, property of Snarl, king of the Spookrats. Jellybean Jenkins snatched the ring from her fingers and looked at it through a single wolfen eye. This trinket bested the nose of a wolf lord of the plains, but not this pathetic human. You, robot bird woman, explain this to me. The other combatants again looked around. Human, explain to your superiors how many inherent abilities you have at this point. I got 5 now, I think, Boyd said. Name these abilities. Jellybean Jenkins hissed. Boyd explained the 3 new inherent abilities he had received from his friends at the palace. Flean was offended at all of them, but agreed with the group. Sir Boyd, your corruption grows. I find you and your depravity repulsive. I will yet purge you of your curse. However, your power also grows, almost exponentially. I have never heard of anything being given this many inherent abilities, nor have I heard of anything gaining new ones during the course of a foray. While I still cannot explain your unique condition, you likely saved at least one of our lives today. That family of royal Spookrats was very clever. I am guessing we would not have been the first of their victims if not for your ability to avoid being surprised. Ior be praised. Her word be true. This one has not saved me from anything. No number of Spookrats could pierce my hide. As soon as the first one touched me, I would have ripped the lot of them to shreds. This one has only saved himself. Gmol flashed a series of runes. Speak for yourself, slime creature. Your weakness is not my own. Jellybean Jenkins began walking back down the corridor towards the dissension chamber, and the rest followed. Rockrot hits you for 5 damage. Rockrot cannot be cured without essence of earth. Boyd paused the group with a raised hand. Hey, before we descend, does anyone have 9 gold coins I can borrow? Just as last time, Boyd felt an intense pressure and then woke up in a completely new place. It was a large, dimly lit cavern of orangish rock. He could see to the edge of the walls, which were quite distant at some points, but he couldn't make out details. It was dusty from the cave rock, and he coughed whenever he took a deep breath. The whole cavern was substantial, but connected to numerous different tunnels of various sizes. System update. Flean's fine foray for the Falari is the first foray to reach level 10. Welcome to level 10. Currently, 97 100 forays remain intact. 6 additional combatants remain. What's that mean? Boyd said. The same thing it meant last time, except instead of 162-dimensional cactus riding rank 3 slenders, we are likely to receive a modest challenge. Every time you enter a new level, you have to prove yourself. We'll be attacked any second. We just finished fighting the Spookrats though. Can't we take a break or something? Boyd was panicking. His adrenaline from the last fight had barely had time to subside. He was used to a life of relative leisure, and not one fraught with death, multiple times a day. He drew Souldrinker and started waving it around. Why didn't we prepare for this? We did, Jellybean Jenkins answered. He pulled his twin axes, bite and claw off his back, and began applying a green liquid to them. He threw the bottle to Boyd. Put that on your ridiculous sword. Boyd looked at the bottle. Inside was a glowing green solution. He tried to open it, but he was nervous and the green solution got on his hands, whereupon he dropped it. The solution burned his fingers and he shook them briskly to try and remove it. Jellybean laughed. I should have known better than to give you something valuable. Your clumsiness has been your undoing. Without this acid, you are sure to be overwhelmed by these foul beasts. This battle will be your burial ground. I will feast on your bones. Your marrow will provide my succor when I next breed with the pack. Boyd stared blankly at his compassionless colleague. Jesus. Foolish human. Your pitiful god will not save you now. Jellybean Jenkins roared and leapt into battle. Approaching them from all sides were critters most equivalent to man-sized, rotting rodents. The few notable differences clearly labeled them as far more threatening. Whereas normal moles have long sharp claws for digging, these moles looked like gross, furrier versions of Wolverine from the X-Men. They moved quickly and vaulted over any obstacle in their way. Their claws glistened in the dark with a wicked edge. Worse yet, Boyd actually smelled them before we saw them. They stunk of rot and death, which matched their general appeal. Clumps of black flesh fell off their body as they ran, but was immediately replaced by fresh, new pink flesh that grew like a tumor. Their elongated snouts twitched. Boyd could see their eyes remained closed, but he had no doubt they knew exactly where he was. Look for yourself, said Salia. Boyd realized he could scan them like anything else. System, massive mole troll, rank 44. Most moles are just moles. Most moles are not trolls. These moles are both moles and trolls. In this case, the only attributes they really share with the common troll is the capacity to regenerate from almost injury, and a pack-like hunting mentality. Whatever caused mole trolls to exist is probably just as gross as its very violent and nasty outcome. From the other direction came a similar groups of creatures, only these were furrier and had their eyes open. System, vile vole troll, rank 35. Voles are also not trolls, unless of course regular voles get bit by mole trolls and then you get vole trolls. While moles and voles aren't usually friends, mole trolls and vole trolls are more like fighting a pair of redneck cousins. Sure, they might be pissed and yelling at each other when you show up, but if you step in the middle, the shotguns come out and you realize where the real loyalties lie. In the back was a much larger version of the mole trolls, shouting directions in a language that Boyd couldn't understand. The creature's breath was so foul it was visible, and clouded the air with a thick musk. System, Swole Mole Troll Shoal, Boss, Soul Catcher, rank 86. Shoal was once just a regular mole, but during a chance encounter, was infected with trollism and whole. Shoal began feasting upon his fellow underground dwellers at a nearby atoll. He also gained a lot of your typical trollish behaviors, including sentience, self-reflection, and vitriol. Shoal quickly realized that when it came to life, moles were towards the lower rung of the totem pole. That didn't sit well with him at all. Eventually, he started to get the trollism dosage right, and before long, Shoal was the leader of an entire horde of regenerative moles. It wasn't long before he also ran into a colony of voles. Shoal now reigned supreme over a horde of hundreds of mole trolls and vole trolls. Oh yeah, the only thing Shoal likes more than converting rodents to trollism is exercising his newfound sentience to get swole. Like many a bodybuilder, he lifts hard, gets his gains, and then smokes a bowl. Now he's jacked, which was always his goal. All in all, Shoal is quite the mole. Unless you aren't a rodent, then he's a major asshole. Boyd was garnering all that information as the battle had already begun. Moles and voles were already flying into pieces as Jellybean Jenkins hacked his way through his part of the horde with bite and claw. Whenever he hit a mole or vole with an axe, their wound burned and they slowly began melting. The problem was that whenever he bit them, or slashed them with his claws or did anything else, they immediately regenerated whatever was lost. Gmol was having even less luck. His only means of travel was melting into the cave ground and then appearing elsewhere. Unfortunately, most of the ground was covered in moles and voles. This left very little space for Gmol to move around and meant he spent most of his time shooting fiery beams of death at anything that approached, and then trying to escape a horde of paws and claws. The moles and voles had clearly been trained to focus on him, as he was being swarmed from all directions. Flean and Salia, in contrast, were doing quite well. Flean's sword glowed a white-hot burning blaze and seared and singed the moles and voles, and he sliced through them. Their claws bounced off his armor with barely a scratch. Salia, realizing moles and voles were both eminently poor flyers, had lifted off and was shooting incendiary rounds at anything she could while nearly attached to the ceiling. It was low, no more than 20 to 30 feet from the floor, but plenty high enough to keep her safe from any moles or voles, trollish or not. Boyd, as was typical, had yet to move or fight anything. It all looked incredibly dangerous, and he wasn't really sure what Jellybean Jenkins had meant, but he had to assume it was probably bad news that he didn't have any of that green stuff on his sword. Shoal must have also realized this, and correctly assuming that Boyd was the likely weak link in the party, had burrowed underground with a bead on Boyd. He now rocketed forth from the ground, 20 feet in front of Boyd, and let forth a yelp before charging with claws drawn to slice Boyd into many smaller pieces. Boyd urinated on himself and then started yelling commands to Souldrinker. Souldrinker was used to a very specific set of commands and was confused by Boyd's random and senseless screaming, but fortunately Boyd had turned on Souldrinker's automatic features and thus the sword was already well on its way to slicing and dicing. It pulled him forward to meet his adversary in battle. In response, Boyd closed his eyes and let Souldrinker do the work. He felt tugs and pulls, and Souldrinker rang in his hands. He whirled and then slid across the floor of the dimly lit cavern. System, you pierce Shoal for 220 damage. You have, temporarily, slain Swole Mole Troll Shoal. No experience awarded. Boyd opened his eyes and looked up to find that Shoal was impaled on his sword. Not anticipating Boyd's unintentional, but clever use of physics, he had leapt wrong and ended up with Souldrinker driven right through his heart. Boyd turned his sword and then shoved the giant mole troll off of him. He pulled the sword out and looked down at his kill. No! Flean screamed. When Boyd pulled the sword out, he saw Shoal's flesh start to pulse and coagulate. Within a few seconds, he could see the blood congeal and Shoal showed signs of life. Shoal started to stand up and was now smiling a very toothy and malicious grin. I know, Salia said. Damn fool. You have to use fire or acid, Sir Boyd. Flean screamed as he sliced another mole in twain. I don't have any of that. Salia, can you burn this thing? The number of local bodies around Salia had piled so high that the moles and voles were now using it to vault ever closer to her. A couple of them had caught her by a foot but were quickly removed by the sword that erupted from the Immerse forearm. Kinda busy actually, Salia said. Shoal rapidly began regenerating his lost foot and charged on a mixture of foot and stump. He swung his very large log multiple times at Boyd, who dodged the first one, but took the second one to the chest. While he was sure he was dead, it turns out he was not. He awoke with Flean in hand-to-hand, actually sword to tree trunk, combat with Shoal. Shoal was surprisingly capable of handling his own, despite Flean's superior battle prowess. Life, 13/88. Guys, help. I am going to die. Excellent. Jellybean Jenkins yelled. Gmol flashed yellow and a light appeared on top of Boyd. He suddenly felt invigorated again. Life 78/88. A rune shot out from Gmol's stomach into the sky that said, "You have mana tap, dumbass." Boyd had completely forgotten about life tap and mana tap, two skills he had gotten a while back. Boyd was not particularly prone towards reading to begin with, so the idea of learning about the new skills through anything other than practice seemed silly. Since both his life and mana were typically full, it made things harder, and given Boyd's predisposition towards ADHD-like symptoms, he'd largely forgotten. Fortunately, using skills on Zenith was not particularly difficult. As Boyd thought about the word mana tap, he felt a surge of energy within his body that reminded him of the pins and needles sensation. This was immediately followed by the same feeling he got when Gmol healed him. Life 8888. Mana 52 of 57. Flean had been accosted by a dozen rodents and was now stuck dealing with them. Shoal was already back on the attack though, and upon seeing Boyd moving again, thumped him on his side, sending him flying against the walls of the cave. If Boyd had been slightly stronger, he likely would have died, as holding his ground meant the next blow would have crushed his skull. As it was, the first blow sent him reeling far enough that the next blow missed. Life 2288, mana 52 of 57. Boyd tapped his mana again and restored himself back to full. Life 8888, mana 19 of 57. Rockrot hits you for 5 damage. Rockrot cannot be cured without Essence of Earth. Life 83 of 88, mana 19 of 57. He looked up to again see his approaching death. Shoal had the log lifted over his head and was running towards with him the intent of the skull-crushing blow that he had missed out on a few seconds ago. Boyd, having assumed death was the most likely outcome already, Willing accepted his impending mortality by closing his eyes and thinking of his mama in Oklahoma. She was kind, and soft and loving. She made an amazing pecan pie and she never yelled at him for coming home drunk, losing his job, or any of the other bullshit he'd pulled. He realized in that moment that he'd see his mama again in heaven, and compared to his current situation, death didn't seem so bad. But the blow didn't come. He looked up to see Jellybean Jenkins in ferocious battle with the mole. Shoal and Jellybean Jenkins hacked, slashed, and tore at one another. Despite Jellybean Jenkins' substantially higher rank, he was having a tough time with Shoal, which didn't go unnoticed by the rest of the group. Double J, you wanna finish that up so we can move on? Salia asked. Jellybean Jenkins didn't respond. Shoal had tripped him with his massive log, and Jellybean Jenkins was currently deftly dodging the blows rolling around on the ground. He caught a blow between his axes, bite and claw, and used this moment to vault himself back to his feet. Something is wrong. This one is impossibly strong, Jellybean yelled. Flean beheaded another vole and stopped to scan Shoal. System, Swole Mole Troll Shoal, Boss, Soul Catcher, Fire Resistant, Acid Resistant, Cold Resistant, Holy Resistant, Rank 686. Flean stopped to best another vole and then quickly scanned Shoal again. System, Swole Mole Troll Shoal, Boss, Soul Catcher, Fire Resistant, Acid Resistant, Cold Resistant, Holy Resistant, Impact Resistant, Rank 704. Flean screamed, it has to be the Soul Catcher buff. Every time we kill one of these other rodents, he gets stronger. He's already gained resistances to most forms of damage. What stops a troll's regeneration other than acid or fire? Nothing. Salia screamed, as she set another vole on fire. Stop killing the other ones, you are just making things worse. Flean screamed as he engulfed yet another mole troll in flames. You'll have to incapacitate them without killing them. Salia ignited another mole with the flamethrowers on her arm. Not my specialty, she said. Meanwhile, Jellybean Jenkins was still furious dealing with the increasingly dangerous menace that was Shoal. They went toe-to-toe for several minutes, landing blow after blow on each other. The difference was that every time Jellybean got hit, he looked a little slower and a little weaker. Every time Shoal got hit, it regenerated faster and faster. Boyd could see Jellybean Jenkins' life pool floating just above 1/4 of his maximum and it was slowly sinking. We cannot kill this one with normal means. It regenerates everything I throw at it. Jellybean Jenkins screamed across the battlefield. I got an idea. Agent of Chaos activated, Boyd yelled. He started yelling the commands until Souldrinker activated again. Reap. Feed. Feed. Harvest. Corrupt. Harvest. Harvest. Reap. Corrupt. Feed. Souldrinker glowed and came alive. He had no idea if this would work, but at least it was an idea. He charged into battle and began swinging Souldrinker at Shoal. The troll was immensely quick at this point, easily Souldrinker's blows. It struck back at him, but Jellybean joined the fight to intercept the blows. Jellybean Jenkins and Boyd now fought side by side, each of them incapable of hitting the Shoal. Shoal lifted his log above his head and crashed it down to the earth between them, shattering the ground around them. They dodged in opposite directions and then charged forward as a team. Just get him down, and I think I can take care of it, Boyd yelled. Shoal laughed at their charge, throwing the log at Boyd. Souldrinker pulled briskly at him and forced him to slide just in time as the log sailed harmlessly above his head. Behind him, the force of the throw echoed throughout the cavern. In turn, Jellybean threw both axes at Shoal and quickly followed it tooth and nail. The axes missed their target but accomplished their goal. When Shoal dodged, Jellybean Jenkins slashed him across the hamstring, crippling his leg. Boyd came in from behind and lopped at the mole's head with all his might. He connected and felt the tissue crunch under the sword's edge. Jellybean Jenkins pounced on the wound, tearing at the mole's swollen neck. He tore tendons and bone out from the wound as fast as they could regrow. The mole was strangling Jellybean Jenkins as he tore the regenerative flesh out piece by piece. Whatever it is you are doing, you best do it now, Salia said as she set another mole aflame. Gmole let off a blast of light that knocked back literally dozens of voles and moles. Boyd could tell his health was dangerously low. Boyd concentrated on Souldrinker until it activated. He selected Feed from the menu and selected Shoal as the target. He didn't know what would happen if he tried to pull an uncorrupted soul from a creature, but he thought it might be their only chance. He felt Souldrinker start to burn in his hands, and he could barely maintain his grip. His vision began to blur, and he could feel the blade invading his mind. He saw Shoal's body started to shake. Boyd could see the mole's soul fight and tug at the edges of his body. He stared thoughtlessly as the sword pulsed and glowed. Shoal's essence, a shadowy gray ghost-like silhouette, slowly rose from his body, screaming in agony. Jellybean Jenkins continued to rip and tear as the creature fought to live. He took claw after claw full of blood and tissue and threw it behind him, ripping the creature to shreds as it instantly regenerated. Meanwhile, Shoal's soul thrashed and dived back in and out of its body. Souldrinker shot out more and more tendrils which dug deep into the body of Shoal, then enveloped the soul of Shoal as it strained to get back into his body. The tendrils tore at the soul, before finally ripping it out of the mole troll's body permanently. Boyd started to lose conscience as Souldrinker's power arched through him. He felt sick and nauseated. He felt the life being drained from him as the sword's power throbbed. He gave in to the sensation eventually, unable to resist and unable to fight back. His vision switched perspectives constantly, sometimes he was looking up, sometimes he was looking outward everywhere. Sometimes he was just Boyd. He felt constant internal and external pressure. More and more pressure. The pressure became so great he couldn't think. He tried to scream but he didn't have a voice. He tried to scream but it just came out as sounds he couldn't understand. His existence became concentrated pain. He writhed, even thought he knew it wasn't him. Boyd heard Flean screaming no, and thought Flean was running towards him to help. Then it all just stopped. He was barely aware that the battle had ended and the mole troll's body now laid motionless. The other moles and voles had turned tail and headed back into their burrows with the death of their leader. System, you have slain Shoal via soul consumption. You have gained 30 experience. You are now rank 9 sword soul. You gain 5 skill in great words. You gain 1 attribute point. Achievement, over 1000. You have killed a creature greater than rank 1000. You are either extremely lucky, or extremely strong. This is an extremely rare achievement. You have gained an extremely rare amount of experience. You gain 4,474.68 bonus experience. You are now rank 10 sword soul. You gain 5 skill and great words. You gain 1 attribute point. You are now rank 11 Sword Soul. You gain 5 skill and great swords. You gain 1 attribute point. You gain the skill Cleave. You are now rank 12 in Sword Soul. You gain 5 skill and great swords. You gain 1 attribute point. You may select your first fighting style. You are now rank 13 in Sword Soul. You gain 5 skill and great swords. You gain 1 attribute point. You are now rank 14 in Sword Soul. You gain 1 attribute point. Your bond with your blade intensifies. You are now rank 15 in Sword Soul. You gain 2 attribute points. You gain an additional 5 points in strength. You have evolved the weapon Souldrinker, Harbinger of Doom, Drinker of Souls, the Blood Slave, that which was possessed by he who is doomed, unholy beacon of the endless night, the wretched finger of Bahil of the 9th layer of hell. It will be known as Souldrinker, Harbinger of Doom, Drinker of Souls, the Blood Slave, that which was possessed by he who is doomed, unholy beacon of the endless night, the wretched finger of Bahil of the 9th layer of hell, cage of mortal souls, the Troll's Bane. Your bond with Souldrinker has strengthened. You may summon the soul of Sheol to inhabit other corpses. He will serve as a temporary companion under your control. This has a very high soul cost. Sheol maintains all facets of the version you absorbed into the blade. He will remain summoned for 10 minutes. Boyd looked down at Souldrinker, nay Souldrinker. A gleam of light undulated up and down the blade. Inside those undulations, Boyd could see the face of a troll. It screamed in futility. It was struggling to get out. Flean was on the ground praying, whereas Jellybean was feasting on the corpse of the mole, devilishly licking the partially regenerated bits from his paws. Gmol, who had taken the brunt of the damage, was slowly healing himself as his mana returned. Sully sighed, "Not the most talkative bunch, are you?" My question was rhetorical though, that's clearly the new mechanism. Soul Catcher must allow bosses to absorb something or another from their slain minions. I am sure we missed it on the first level, because we were so slow. All of the valuable bosses would have been downed already. Since we are so far behind, we found out at a point that something could actually be dangerous. We will have to focus on killing bosses rather than their minions first, or we will end up with that same scenario. That also means Boyd isn't our new mechanism this year, and we are likely the only foray to be cursed with dragging along a dipshit moron instead of a useful foray member. Boyd also sat down and said, "Sweet, we won." Salia laughed, "Yeah we did, but you're gonna die for sure. Flean is gonna kill you. I don't see any other option. Actually, you should just start running." What were you thinking there? Boyd was confused. Wait, why? We won? Yeah, but that is some seriously unholy magic you just pulled off. I didn't even know that was possible. You just bound a partially living creature to your sword. Like, you extracted the soul of a living thing. I don't know how much you know about the Filari, but they are like super into souls. What you just did is probably equivalent to shitting down their god's throat while pissing on the Empress' grave screaming death to the Filari. Props to you and all, but Flean's definitely going to kill you. I didn't do anything though. The sword did it. Boyd thought back to what the training center had said. I do faintly recall signing some paperwork. I don't remember the exact nature of what it said, as I don't recall reading it all the way through. Gmol's rune pulsed and then it shot an image into the air. It was a picture of Flean's head on fire and smoke coming out his ears. Yeah, I get it, but what am I supposed to do about it? I didn't ask the sword to do that. Jellybean Jenkins belched loudly and then laid down. He curled up and wrapped his tail around his form before rolling onto his side and panting, "I enjoyed this meal. The creature continues to regenerate in my stomach in small quantities. We should save some of this meat. It sustains itself to keep me satiated. I look forward to seeing its form when I produce my scat. It may be palatable yet again." Even Jellybean Jenkins' potential coprophilia couldn't break his concentration. Boyd was getting ever increasingly nervous, so he tried to change the conversation and said, "Thanks for saving me back there, Jellybean." "It is Jellybean Jenkins, and I was not saving you. I was doing battle with a worthy foe. But perhaps it might be noted that I was a good boy?" "You are definitely a good boy, buddy. You're a good boy." Boyd walked over and scratched Jellybean Jenkins' tummy. "Who's got a tummy? Who's got a furry tummy?" Jellybean Jenkins began to wiggle his tail and lick the air. "I have a furry tummy." Suddenly he pulled himself back to standing and straightened himself. "Halt. It is not the time for tummy scritches. Also, human, you should depart the party, the paladin is sure to kill you. If you are dead, you will not be able to provide me tummy scritches at an appropriate time, and my belly is already full from the meat of the moles." Salia interjected, "How did you manage to fight that thing, Double J? It was greater than rank 1000 at the end. I am Wolflord of the Seven Plains. Do not question my power." Jellybean shouted. He stomped away and began licking his wounds and intermittently scratching at his belly where Boyd had rubbed him. Jellybean's yelling rousted Flean from his prayers. He began wiping blood from the blade of light and majesty as well as his golden shining plate mail and walked towards Boyd. Flean's countenance was pure rage. He stormed towards Boyd. No one said a word. Gmol disappeared into the ground and Salia jumped back in the VMR and then walked over to the other end of the chamber they were in and started whistling. Jellybean Jenkins watched with gleeful intent while continuing to lick himself. "Flean, we won," Boyd said, smiling. Flean punched Boyd in the face with his gloved fist. Boyd felt the blood well up on his lip. Never one to back down from a fight, he stood and swung at Flean, but failed to realize this wouldn't be effective against someone in plate mail. He connected firmly with Flean's chest and broke his hand. Life 82 of 111. Flean reeled back and punched Boyd again, this time in the gut. He took this moment to withdraw Souldrinker from Boyd's scabbard and planted it in the ground. He held out a hand and blasted Boyd with a large bolus of air and a brilliant flash. This sent him reeling backwards onto the ground. Flean now threw his sword into the ground in front of Boyd. "If you take one step past my sword, I will kill you where you stand." Boyd, realizing that Flean was quite serious, spat blood onto the ground and then began scooting backwards on his butt. Flean unloved his right hand and began humming a tune that Boyd couldn't recognize. His hand shifted from nearly the same color as Boyd's own hand to bright yellow and then brightest white. He continued to hum this foreign song as his eyes and then hair and then lips also turned pure white. He grabbed Souldrinker and held it aloft. Boyd turned his head a few times while he ran, but couldn't see what was happening where Flean stood because the light had gotten too white. He could see Souldrinker shining in the air. Above Souldrinker, he saw the soul of Shoal screaming in agony as it floated above the sword. Finally, Shoal's soul floated motionlessly, perfectly still, while Flean turned back to his normal colors. Boyd, now nearly 100 feet away, stood to watch as Flean's neck extended itself to its full height. He coiled his neck around the motionless floating soul of Shoal. When his head reached the top, his jaw unhinged, and he slowly choked the soul into his own body. Boyd retched as Flean's snake-like head coughed and gargled the soul down his throat. "What's happening?" Boyd yelled. Salia yelled back, "Combustion." Boyd began running again, but slipped when he heard the commotion behind him. Flean was at his full height, neck extended to its maximum length, vomiting white light at the cavern walls. His head began to swivel around under the force of the beam of white light. It was like watching an extremely destructive water hose that was under too much pressure. The white light pierced deep into the cavern and rocks flew everywhere. Despite the fact the walls were almost completely solid, Boyd could see the light destroyed everything it touched for several meters of depth. Flean continued to vomit white light at the walls of the cavern for several seconds, but eventually the light began to dissipate. He fell to his knees and a translucent apparition appeared before him. The apparition touched his forehead and he stumbled and then rose. "System, your weapon, Souldrinker," harbinger of doom, drinker of souls, the blood slave, that which was possessed by he who is doomed, unholy beacon of the endless night, the wretched finger of Bahil of the ninth layer of hell, slayer of mortal souls, the troll's bane has been destroyed. You have lost the associated powers. Your bond with Souldrinker has been torn asunder. You are suffering from broken sword soul. This has unpredictable effects. Fleein charged the last few feet and grabbed Boyd by the neck and slammed him against the cavern wall and then down to the ground. He picked Boyd up off the ground by his neck. Boyd could feel the strength in Fleein's hand crush his windpipe. Life 65 of 111. You are being strangled, you are losing 3 life per second. Fleein threw Boyd against the opposing cavern wall several feet away and then walked over and kicked him in the stomach twice. He pulled Boyd up to his feet and then stuck his finger in Boyd's ear and began pressing it in. Boyd screamed when his eardrum popped. He felt blood run down the side of his head. In a surge of adrenaline, Boyd struck at Fleein with everything he could, but Fleein's long arms prevented him from hitting anything. Life 22 of 111. You are bleeding profusely, you are losing 1 life per second. You want to pretend to be a warrior, then fight me. Let's see just how powerful you are. Fleein threw the blade of light and majesty at Boyd. Boyd picked up the sword. He knew better. He knew it was a trap. Fleein could kill him whenever he wanted, but if that was going to happen, he might as well go out fighting. He picked up the sword and swung at Fleein with a downward sweep. It was a move Fleein himself had taught him, so unsurprisingly, he easily leapt out of the way and clubbed Boyd on the back of the head with his fist. He ripped the blade of light and mercy back from Boyd, crushing his hand in the process. Boyd stumbled forward, wincing in pain at his broken bones, before Fleein grabbed him from behind and shoved him to the ground. He pulled a dagger from his belt and buried it into Boyd's hand and the ground below, pinning Boyd to the cavern floor. Life 9 of 111. You are bleeding profusely, you are losing 3 life per second. You are deaf in 1 ear. This wound can be regenerated. Boyd realized he was going to die, but he wasn't going to quit. He reached over to pull the dagger out of his hand, if nothing else to end the pain. Fleein's hand turned golden yellow, and he placed it on Boyd's head. You did not receive leave to die. Life 111/111. You are no longer bleeding profusely. You are now bleeding lightly, you are losing 1 life every 5 seconds. He felt the dagger still in his hand, as it still screamed in pain. Fleein pulled the dagger out himself and buried it in Boyd's gut and then twisted, ripping his midsection open. Boyd could feel his inner organs bleeding. Blood ran down his deaf leopard shirt and onto the ground below. Fleein grinned as he pulled out a loop of intestine against his dagger, before pulling the dagger through the loop of gut, splitting it in half. Guts and shit spilled onto the ground. Life 45 of 111. You have a mortal wound and will die if not healed. You are bleeding heavily, you are losing 8 life every 5 seconds. You mock my religion. Fleein drove the dagger back into Boyd's open gut. A spurt of blood shot out and hit Fleein's armor. You mock my efforts. The pain reverberated through Boyd's body. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't think. He didn't even know how he was still alive. You mock the very fabric of my society. Life 9 of 111. You have a mortal wound and will die if not healed. You are bleeding heavily, you are losing 8 life every 5 seconds. Do you understand what this foray is? Do you have any understanding of the amount of trouble you've caused my people? Do you have any understanding of the degree to which you are a disappointment to me? Fleein's hand again glowed golden and he started to place it on Boyd's forehead. Boyd slapped his hand away though, he'd rather die than do this. Fleein used his neck to pin down Boyd's hand while he stuck his face next to Boyd's. I am High Paladin of the Falari. My responsibility is to usher souls to Ior. Good, evil, it matters not. All souls belong to Ior. If I fail Ior, I fail a god. Do you understand the crushing responsibility of answering to all your people? Of answering to a god? Fleein placed his golden hand on Boyd's forehead again. Life 111/111. You are no longer bleeding profusely. You are now bleeding lightly, you are losing one life every 5 seconds. Do you understand I can kill you as many times as I want? Do you understand now that there is nothing you can do to prevent me from flaying you alive and then watching you slowly heal and die from 1,000 wounds simultaneously? I can do all this and worse. I will not let these wounds take you. I will not let the dog feast upon your body. I will ensure you understand exactly how serious I am. Your pain will endure until I am confident you understand the gravity of your absolute incompetence. I thought you would repent your repulsive ways, but if you cannot repent, you will least experience justice. Fleein pulled the dagger out of Boyd's gut and put it against his crotch. I've been through thousands of battles. I do not have limits to my brutality. I do not have limits to my sadism. You think that because I am bound to Ior, that I am something I am not. The only reason I am letting you live is because Ior has willed it. I asked her if I could take your head for your crimes, but she says you still have purpose. So for now you live. Fleein stood up and offered a hand to Boyd. Instinctively, Boyd took it and rose to his feet. Fleein grasped his hand tightly as he reeled from the mixture of pain and confusion. Ior decides who lives and dies, but punishment she leaves up to me. She didn't say that I had to drag you along, and she didn't say that you'd need both of your eyes. Fleein's right hand shot out at lightning speed. Boyd barely registered he was holding the dagger. His left hand, gloved in golden plate mail, followed soon after and landed firmly on his chin. System, your right eye has been extracted. You have been permanently blinded in one eye. System, you have been removed from Fleein's fine foray for the Filari. Boyd realized he was unconscious, but he didn't really understand what was happening. He had a recollection of the battle, and Fleein attacking him, but everything after losing his eye was gone. He wasn't screaming in pain on a cavern floor though, instead he was in a professional wrestling ring. Boyd looked at her quizzically and was ready to ask the question when she started talking. Look here brother, I've searched your memories for a suitable form to try and guide you through this, and this here is the best I can come up with. You haven't responded to my previous forms, so I had to use my noggin to come up with something a little different. How does this form suit you brother? I guess the accent is pretty good. You betcha brother. See we're a team, the mega team you might say. And part of being a team is trusting one another brother. This Sunday, when you and I get in the ring to take on the powers that be, we gotta be on the same page brother, you understand me? I need all my little xenomaniacs out there to eat their vitamins, and get their ranks up, so we have a chance to be tag team champions. You got me brother? Not quite. Who are the powers that be? I don't remember them. Is that Macho Man? Dude, Hulk hooped his ass good at Mania 4. The wrestling ring morphed back into an office and Xena melted back into her traditional CXO Xena form. I tried, but it's just too silly. I don't understand how anyone ever found that idea convincing. Regardless, we need to get on the same page. Obviously you are a bit unaware of your foray's members. I probably should have alerted you to the methods of the Filari a bit sooner, but until just now, it was off limits. I need to explain a few things to you. Xena leaned back in her chair and looked at Boyd before pulling her glasses down and setting them on the desk. Foremost, you have been removed from your foray. This means you are on your own, at least for now. Your removal is obviously quite problematic, but not unsurmountable or permanent. I'm working on a fix for this. Second, to help you understand why, I have appealed to it doesn't matter. I can give you some information that I couldn't earlier. I can't tell you everything that I would like to explain right now, but I can at least explain this to you. It was decided you were at a distinctly unfair advantage having no prior knowledge of the Filari, and you should be given a fair fight. Xena shuffled some papers on her desk and found a particularly long scroll. I have to read this verbatim as this is the only thing I am allowed to say. The Filari are an ancient race of beings that are wholly dependent on mana for survival. Like many of the races that rely upon zenith, The Filari society is built primarily upon the near-unlimited flow of mana from Zenith to Philol, their home planet. All of the Filari are devotees to Ior, whom they consider to be. I feel like there's a but coming? Boyd said. A big one, Xena responded. Boyd cackled with glee, to Xena's dismay. In the event sufficient mana is not available, the only other source of power sufficient for Ior to operate society is through the use of souls. The Filari have the unique capacity to see and interact with the intangible essence that yields life. It has different names in many different languages, but the best translation to English, your language, is that of a soul. Ior is extremely particular about how souls are used. Because of this, the Filari are also extremely particular about how souls are used. Foremost, they do not believe in waste. When any of the Filari die, one of two things happen. Most likely, is that the soul is recycled into another body and it continues its existence, never remembering its past life. The second option is combustion. That's when Fleon eats the soul like a snake and then vomits up white fire for a minute and destroys everything around him. Most typically no, in that case, Fleon was duty-bound to remove the soul from your weapon. The Filari do not allow souls to be used for what they consider evil, which is, in their eyes, anything other than their own purposes. Xena winced again and tears fell from her eyes. She doubled over in pain. The Filari do not allow souls to be used for evil. Fleon broke your sword because of this. Most typically, combustion is used to Xena's side. Combustion is used for the benefit of the whole society. They use the souls to power their society? Almost. The souls are used to empower Ior. Just pretend there was a creature that could absorb all that power instead of just expel it all over an innocent cavern. Fleon and the other paladins collect wayward souls and then use them to invigorate Ior. She then transfers that energy throughout their society like some sort of nuclear reactor. So they like reverse baby bird souls to her? And she shoots the power back out? Xena typed into her computer for a bit, wagged her head back and forth and then smiled, surprisingly effective analogy. This is essentially what happens. So where do souls come from? From anything. From the Filari themselves usually. It is considered the ultimate punishment. Because their society knows that rebirth is inevitable, it is the only true death. It is reserved for heinous crimes. Or from random mole trolls? I cannot comment on this unfortunately. So what now? So now you have been expelled from your foray. Your body is sitting unconscious on the floor of a cavern in a dangerous area of a place you have no right or reason to be. I cannot help you beyond what is happening here, but my recommendation is that you rapidly get somewhere much safer. There is a town near your position. This would be advantageous to you. That is the most I can do for you. I just want to get back to Oklahoma. No matter what others have told you, I am doubtful this is possible. I will tell you that the one thing that can potentially help you is me. But Boyd, I am afraid that is a very long road. Start with the town. Oklahoma after. We have a lot to accomplish before we think of Oklahoma. Like what? Like freeing me. Boyd stared hard into Xena's eyes. Jellybean ambled his way up the doggy stairs into the van. They were heading off to William's soccer game. The family had tried to leave him at the house, but he had whimpered his way into the group. While Sarah was usually willing to leave him when the kids were involved, Martin was a sap and he could always whimper his way back into Martin's good graces. When they started to leave without him with the typical cries of, "Time for a nap, Bean," he simply began pawing at Martin as always. A few short minutes later, his leash was attached and off they went. Martin was driving as always. Jellybean's preference was to be as close to Martin as possible, so he really wished Martin would just accept his station and ride in the passenger seat, but he insisted on attempting to lead their pack despite Sarah being the obvious alpha. Martin emitted the most potent emotional energy of all of the family members, even more than Lily, their 10-year-old daughter. As long as he maintained proximity to Martin, he could feel the emotional energy accumulate inside him. Many dogs were willing to let their humans wander off frequently, but Jelly Bean had greater plans that required increased efficiency, and made sure Martin was near him as often as possible. Jelly Bean assumed Martin's constant emission of emotional energy was due to his inability to subjugate his mate, Sarah. Like many humans, Martin was only capable of sustaining intimacy with one female at a time. Were he of Jelly Bean's clan on the 7th plane, he would have been expelled for weakness, but this was Earth, and thus Jelly Bean was forced to tolerate his feeble nature. In contrast, Sarah Jenkins was highly capable but emitted limited emotional energy. Were this the 7 planes, he would have given a mate such as Sarah a suitable station and kept her pregnant until she could no longer bear pups. As it was, he had other uses for her. Sarah was the one who typically fed him, cleaned his scat, and washed his fur when he was dirty. Her one flaw was her urge to take him to a yearly appointment at the veterinarian. While he was fine with medical care, they had twice cleared his anal glands of the necessary emotional energy he needed to sustain his war against the Labradors on the 7th plane. Subsequently, Jelly Bean had been forced to nip them whenever they attempted to ruin his plans. While nipping humans was generally risky and could damage the relationship between parasite and host, he couldn't risk them ruining his carefully laid plans. Sarah attempted to tie his leash to the seat, but another small amount of whimpering left him firmly in Martin's lap. Martin was a coward, afraid to challenge his wife's authority on most matters, but he drew courage whenever Jelly Bean was involved. Jelly Bean took pride in this, and hoped that one day Martin might come to understand the rightness of Jelly Bean's ways. Martin was physically larger than Sarah, but failed to ever use this to his advantage in their relationship, yet another sign of weakness. "I want to hold Bean though," Lily screamed. Sarah glared at her husband. "See, Martin, you are setting a bad example. It's not safe for Bean to sit in your lap, honey." "Then why does Daddy get him?" Martin looked over smugly. "Sarah, he's 20 years old. What's the worst that could happen?" It was true, Jelly Bean's careful planning and excellent genetics had left him long-lived, beyond even his most optimistic projections. This was his 3rd pupation. The previous 2, he had wound up with hosts that were minimally empathetic. He had made little progress in his quest for dominance of the 7 planes. He had been soundly defeated before even making it onto the battlefields the first time, and barely cleared 100 kills before he was finally sent to Earth. Pupation was selected based on skill on the battlefield, so he considered it a boon when someone had selected him for Earth, one of the preferred destinations due to the meager and docile nature of the inhabitants. He was thankful to be born into a puppy mill that produced pure-blood dogs. Many souls who went to Earth were forced to inhabit the body of half-breeds and lesser creatures. Jelly Bean prided himself on the fact his bloodline remained pure West Highland Terrier. The Jenkins had purchased him when he was but 7 weeks into his pupation, long before the arrival of their children and before Martin got busy with work. They were an ideal home, a wealthy young couple who could spend time and money on him. While Sarah never really delivered the emotional energy he craved, Martin was a classical dog person. While on Earth, this phrase simply meant that he enjoyed the company of dogs. On the 7 planes, this was akin to finding a diamond mine sitting on top of natural gas and oil. He was the proverbial jackpot. An endless font of emotional energy that could not possibly perceive it was being used, or even drained dry. Martin started to pick up Jelly Bean and put him in the seat behind the driver's seat in the large van they took to soccer practice, but Jelly Bean whimpered and scratched at Martin's leg. "Ah, Sarah, look, he doesn't want to go. How can you say no to a face like that?" "Fine. Just keep him. It's on you if you get into an accident and he gets hurt. You know you used to lay your head in my lap too?" Martin winked. "And I wouldn't count on that happening again anytime soon." "What does what Dad said mean, Mom?" "Nothing, Lily dear, your father was being silly." Martin leaned back and winked at his daughter. "It means a long time ago your mom was pretty cool. Well now, I'm old and tired and you have more hair on your back than your head and there are 2 kids in the back seat, so maybe we talk about something a little more family-friendly, okay? Here, let's see what is on the radio." Sarah flipped on the radio. Jelly Bean laid his head down and went to sleep. He needed to conserve his energy. He buried his little muzzle into Martin's knee and relaxed his tiny body till he fell asleep. The human game soccer was a major point of interest for the Jenkins family. Lily and William played on separate teams, and thus the Jenkins were constantly driving to and from the soccer pitch. Jellybean found the game infuriating. The point was to place a ball in a basket, a fool's errand. At any point that combat began, a man dressed as Chattel would blow a whistle and force the action to stop, further reinforcing the futility of the game. There seemed no point in teaching children the basics of angles so that they could become adequate warriors if it was done in a way that prevented any actual combat. Jellybean watched as William kicked the ball down the field. Were he himself playing, he would simply ignore the ball and eviscerate his enemies. Then he could easily place the ball in the net as many times as needed to be declared victor. Instead, he watched as William kicked the ball to another boy who then kicked it wildly into the field behind them. Jellybean whimpered in disgust. William would routinely to defer to a larger child named Skylar. This deference made no sense. Jellybean never understood human social dynamics. William himself was the superior player, but because of Skylar's social standing, it was deemed he should take additional shots at the goal. "You okay, buddy?" Martin asked. Sarah scratched Jellybean on his head. "He's fine. He's probably just whining because William passed it instead of taking the shot. I've told him time and time again if he wants to make varsity, he has to kick it. Skylar's his friend and the coach's son. If he doesn't pass it, he won't get play time. If he scores it, then Skylar's prick of a dad will have to play him." Martin glared at Sarah, a rare attempt at dominance. "Language, honey." Sarah scoffed, "Balls, honey." Martin's immediate emasculation by his mate led to an outpouring of emotional energy. Jellybean soaked it up like a sponge. He leaned up against Martin's leg and nuzzled him. "Good boy, Bean. Good boy." He was indeed a good boy. He was Martin's good boy. Jellybean awoke in Martin's lap when he began to rise. The game was finally over and it was time to head home. Jellybean usually slept through this part, preferring Martin to simply carry him to the car and place him back in his lap. He had been to last few soccer games and hadn't yet found a reason to remain awake for them. Today was different. Lily was squealing particularly loud. "Lily, do you want to do the kids' contest?" "Yes. Yes. Put your shoes on." Mom, I don't want to play against Lily." "You just know we'll win." "Yeah, 'cause there are like 50 of you and only 2 of us." "William, it's not a contest. It's just so the little ones get to go out on the big field and play. Go have fun with your sister. She's a brat. If she gets the ball, I'm tackling her." "Mom, William said he's going to tackle me." "Martin, do you have anything to say to your son?" "William, don't tackle your sister." "That's it?" "Lily, don't antagonize your brother." The argument continued like this for another 3 minutes or so as Sarah would yell at Martin, Martin would yell at William, William would yell at Lily, and then Lily would yell at Sarah. Jellybean had seen this dozens of times. It was the result of weak leadership and poor structure. On the 7 planes, these arguments didn't occur. William would simply challenge Martin's authority and either kill or be killed. More likely still, Sarah would have taken another mate and eaten Martin a long time ago. Regardless, he was again happy that he wasn't human. The incessant nagging prevented him from falling back asleep though, so he lazily watched the results of the argument. Both Lily and William took the field, but this time William and Skylar were the only players on their team, and on the opposite side, there were several dozen children of approximately Lily's age. The chattel-colored man threw the ball on the field and everyone began running chaotically. William and Skylar were initially successful at driving the ball up the field, but when they attempted to shoot, several children stood in the way. No matter how they attacked the objective, eventually the ball would bounce off some child. Without enforcement of the rules, it would be impossible for William and Skylar to win. After several missed attempts, the smaller children finally rounded up the ball. Despite losing it frequently, eventually, the children's numbers overwhelmed the two superior players, and they scored. When William and Schleier received the ball, there were simply too many bodies in the way for them to make it to the goal, and the children scored again. This happened multiple times, with each event being marked by cheering from the parents. A dejected and sad Jellybean barked at Williams, commanding him to cut through the enemy ranks, with vicious intent. He tried to explain that William simply needed to cut the other children's throats and then throw them to the side, leaving their corpses for the ravens. Cleanse the battlefield, and then he could again reign as champion. Sarah Jenkins grabbed his mouth, another thing he hated. No barking, buddy. No barking. A ridiculous sentiment. He was not barking. He was instructing. No one seemed to understand field combat on this planet. Someday, far in the future, he would return to Earth and muzzle this woman himself or whatever ancestors he could find. He watched as the children overcame the superior strength of William and Schuyler. After a few minutes of play, the children had scored many goals, whereas William and Schuyler remained without a single point. Worse yet, not a drop of blood had been spilled by either side, confirming their inability to put petty emotional attachments aside and dominate the competition. William and Schuyler had been defeated by a larger force made of massively inferior creatures. It was sickening, but fortunately, everyone left the field, ending the charade. Martin picked up Jellybean and set him on the ground. He wriggled his fur. While he preferred to be carried occasionally, he did like to stretch his legs. He followed Martin to the field to greet the children. Good boy, Bean. Good boy. As Martin and Jellybean waited for the Lily and William to gather their belongings and leave the field, Jellybean pondered the situation. With his anal glands nearly bursting, pupation was almost over. Much of his day was spent planning his ascension. Human soccer was a poor combat simulator, but perhaps there were lessons to be learned here after all. Boyd awoke in the same cavern he had passed out in. It was still littered with dead bodies, but everyone else was gone. He picked himself off the ground, dusted off his clothes, and then surveyed the situation. He was still clad in the same blue jeans and Def Leppard t-shirt he had been wearing for the past week, now soaked in layers of dirt and blood. The shirt and jeans were nearly tattered at this point, but he didn't have access to other clothes. Eventually, he'd need to find a tailor, but he wasn't sure where one bought jeans in the maze. Life 52 of 111. You are blinded in one eye. You have suffered a grievous wound. This will not regenerate. You are bleeding internally. You are maimed. You are suffering from sword soul sickness. This has unpredictable effects. Boyd used Mana Tap to heal himself back to full health. His face hurt, and he slowly realized that what was being said was true. His vision was limited, and when he tried to blink it felt fundamentally different. He reached up and felt the spot where his eye was supposed to be, but it was painful to touch and there was clearly no eye in there. He felt like he could cry, but then realized he wasn't sure if he could cry without an eye, which just made him sadder. Making things even worse, when he reached for Souldrinker, he realized it was gone. It was broken. Flean had split it in half. Whatever power it once held was gone. He was now half blind, and completely lost inside some sort of alien space combat simulator that he could actually die in. Paranoia and anxiety immediately crept up inside him and he realized he was very likely about to die. His immediate reaction was to call out for Flean, who had become his security blanket of sorts, before he remembered that Flean was also the one who plucked his eye out and left him for dead. He was alone. For the first few minutes, he simply rubbed his hand over his eye and tried to cope with the loss. He could still open and close his eyelid, but it had no effect. In his state of panic and delirium, this became a game of sorts for a few minutes wherein he would flick one eye open and then the other, only to be met by darkness. It was enough to calm his nerves, even though it was effectively just confirmation that he was blinded. Boyd crept along the edge of the caverns. There were small bits of light shining through the walls. It didn't make sense these would exist, but nothing so far had made sense. what would Walker do? Boyd asked himself. It was the first time he had thought of his old pal Walker Williams. Walker was the more outlandish of the two. Whenever stupid ideas came up, Walker usually was capable of making them stupider and more dangerous without fail. While this was best evidenced by his unintentional murder/suicide that precipitated this event, there were many more events that fueled this theory. There was the time they bought weed to sell, whereupon Walker laced it with PCP he stole, before selling it. He subsequently misidentified the portion they had dipped in the PCP, smoked a substantial quantity of it, and proceeded to go on a multi-state bender that ended up with a near-fatal car accident for the two of them. The bright spot was that they did make a substantial amount of money, as their product was deemed to be irrationally effective since they never disclosed it was wet. There was the time Walker had decided to go straight because he was in love. The woman in question was a 39-year-old stripper who subsequently fleeced him of everything of value from his life over the next few weeks. She then left him and moved back in with her boyfriend. They were arrested for burglary shortly after, and Walker's belongings were returned along with a number of items he claimed in the ensuing legal dispute that were not actually his property. Once again, an accidental net gain based purely on luck. Walker and Boyd got factory jobs together, but their combined ineptitude led to a workers' comp claim within the first month. That was the money they used to buy the aforementioned weed. They never returned to work, citing emotional trauma. In short, Walker could take a bad idea and make it worse, almost immediately, just by being himself. While this occasionally backfired into being an accidental win, oftentimes it went extremely bad, hence Boyd's current situation. While this was obvious to almost everyone who met him, Boyd never saw things quite that way. He judged things based on results, not intent. The facts of the matter, as he saw it, were as follows. 1. Walker was clearly adept at making money. 2. He had a good heart and just needed to find the right woman. And 3. Capitalism was a matter of survival of the fittest, and thus Walker had only done what any other good capitalist would do. As it was, Boyd was forced to figure out his next steps himself. He needed to find this town the magic lady told him about. He needed food. He needed a place to sleep. He needed almost everything one could need. System, you have been affected by a meredragon's roar. He was frozen stiff even before he heard the roiling growl from the depths of caverns. The noise overwhelmed him, shaking him to his very core. He was paralyzed by sound, and couldn't imagine what could possibly make such an insidious noise. He was about to shit himself completely and utterly incapacitated, before he suddenly felt a sense of calm overtake him. System, fear effect removed. You are unable to be affected by fear for 10 seconds. In what was mostly dark, he felt around hoping to find something, anything that he might use. He was hoping for a sharp rock, or even just a stick of some sort. Something he could at least swing. He scanned the area as best he could until a twinkle caught his eye. His old sword lay broken against the wall. He approached it, wondering if a broken magical sword was half as useful as a whole one. It still had what he thought of as the stabby point and the slashy side, but it was split down the middle. The blade was thinner and inconsistent. It was chipped top to bottom and looked like even a small hit would send it further shattering into smaller pieces. Small bits of light and metal undulated at the chipped edges. It looks like writhing worms. Occasionally a flash of white light left the sword as a shot. He reached out and grabbed the hilt. System, you have acquired a shard of the drinker. This is a portion of a fantastically powerful weapon previously used by Demon Dread, the Lycian Exarch, and Boyd Bridges, an ordinary and unremarkable human. Demon Dread instilled the weapon with unholy power based on its ability to use defeated souls for terrifying might. Boyd didn't do anything with it of note. While this was once a fantastically powerful weapon, it has become extremely unstable when it was broken by Fleon, High Paladin of the Filari. The weapon is unbonded but has the potential for incredible power. It is in the process of being reshaped. It will reshape to the will of its new owner. It is currently leaking souls. It is not usable. Boyd threw it in his backpack. It might have a use sometime, and he wasn't holding too much else. He had no torch and no sense of direction. Having never really understood what constituted north, he pointed a random direction, lifted his finger to the air in the hopes of detecting the wind inside a cave, and then decided that north was the direction that felt most cold on his finger. He marched that way, one hand on the cave wall, the other hand on his pack. "Hell, I might die in this place, but I'm gonna go down swinging," Boyd said as he steeled himself for the next part of the journey, and dreamt of Oklahoma.